and a lot of times a high five. And I know I can speak for the board, the administration, the Wayside staff, students, families, and saying that the loss is very great for our district and very great for Wayside, and that our thoughts and prayers are with his wife and his 2 daughters and with the millions of family and friends that he has left behind. So I just want to start, sorry for getting emotional, we love Mr. B in this house. So if we can stand for the pledge, and then we'll just do a moment of silence for Mr. B. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And thank you. Okay, so moving on, my president's report, we do have a lot we're going to get to tonight in my report, doing our Board of Ed training and goals with Ms. Weinkoff and Michael Gross, one of our attorneys. I would like to just start before that though. I believe we have our student representatives on here. Dr. Stankwitz, do we have them on here tonight?
I think we have Mr. Panaris, if I'm not mistaken.
I know one's Gio Panaris. I don't know if he's on here.
Gio,
do we know the other name that maybe?
I didn't think they were going to be on yet. I don't know.
Perhaps they're not. Perhaps next time. I'm not sure if they're on there yet.
Is the board office computer open? Because I can't hear Dr. Stankwitz speaking.
Can you hear me?
Are they unmuted?
Is that microphone on? Jim, tap it.
I requested them to.
Oh, Jim, you got to lean over to the computer next to you and hit unmute.
It is unmute.
It should be saying like it wants to unmute you.
Is it allowed to do that?
Is that any better?
That's better. Sorry.
There we go. Sorry. I don't think we have our representatives yet. Probably
Okay.
we can do that next month.
Okay, perfect. Great. Sorry about that then. All right, so then I'm gonna jump right in and welcome Kathy Weinkoff from New Jersey School Boards Association, as well as Michael Gross, one of our attorneys. We're gonna go into, we have Board of Ed training and goals that we're gonna be talking about this evening. So I think we're starting with Kathy, right?
Yes.
Hi, Kathy.
How are you?
We're good, thank you.
That's good. So I want to have you just, if you can, allow me to share my screen because I have a couple PowerPoints that I'm going to use as we go through our training this evening. Okay, great. So we're going to, let me just ask Amy if you want me to start with the board self-evaluation and goals, or would you like Michael and I to start with ethics?
Why don't we start with ethics and then we'll go to goals after.
Okay, that'll be terrific. All right. So, Michael and I are going to go through the PowerPoint. I'm going to say to you as board members, if anybody has any questions, if you can jump in with your questions, or if you would prefer that we wait until the end, we can do it that way also. So I just wanted to start off by saying that there is a code of ethics that school board members have to abide by, and it really does encompass board members and administrators in the district, and part of that evolved around making sure that board members and administrators avoid any kind of conduct that would be a violation of the public trust that your electorate has voted you in as Board of Education members. And it was established, the Code of Ethics, in 1992. one of the things that it does is that it ensures and preserves public confidence, and that board members and school administrators should have standards to guide your conduct. And there are, through the establishment of the code, there is a disciplinary mechanism to ensure that the standards are maintained. And it's important, just as you can see in the yellow box, that it applies to not only just traditional boards of education, but it does apply to charter school trustees and to administrators. The other thing that's important to note is that within the CUSAC monitoring system, and that is the system whereby the state monitors the school districts, that there is a provision in the CUSAC DPRs, District Performance Review, that the board members have to have an annual discussion around the Code of Ethics. So in the dinosaur days, whenever I was on the board, the Code of Ethics training was pretty much that board members read the Code of Ethics and we were done. But as per CUSAC, we really have to show within the minutes of the meeting that there is a discussion that takes place. And not only that, but board members have to file financial disclosure statements annually. And you also have to list any board members that have been found in violation of the Code of Ethics. So that's all through the CUSAC monitoring process. When the Code of Ethics was established, it included the School Ethics Commission, and the School Ethics Commission is the body that hears any complaints or reviews any complaints that have been brought up against board members. The actual Code of Ethics was established in 2001, which was 9 years after the act was enacted. And believe it or not, the Code of Ethics actually came from a Board of Education who put together the tenets of the Code of Ethics, and then it was later adopted into statute by the legislature. The ethics also includes conflicts of interest that board members may have. I mentioned the disclosure statements, which are personal, relative, and financial. And then it also, a few years ago, established training requirements for Board of Education members. So that training, just so people know, as new board members come on the board, they have to attend training in the first 3 years of their term. So year one is for new board member orientation. It really does cover skills that are needed. It has to cover CUSAC training as well as training for the superintendent's evaluation. Then years 2 and 3, governance 2 and 3 cover school finance, and then student achievement. And then the first year of a re-elected year, a board member has to go through training. And that is generally a legal update that covers any kind of legal issues that have occurred during that time frame. So that is required. If any board member misses any pieces of their training, it does get reported to the School Ethics Commission. They do give you a period of time to make sure that you get that training taken place. It has to be done within that year. But if you don't get it done, generally they will give you a little bit of grace time. If you don't get the training done within that grace time, then you are issued an order to show cause and to explain to the School Ethics Commission why you haven't been able to take your training And the School Ethics Commission can remove you from the board if you do not take that training. So it's really important for you all to make sure that you have those training requirements. And generally, the business administrator will keep track of that to let you know which training that you need to take in a particular year. And then newly elected, you also have to have training under harassment, intimidation, and bullying. And that's only required once, and it usually occurs in Governance 1, and then any kind of updates will occur in that fourth, that re-elected year term. So that's always something for board members just to keep on top of. And believe it or not, we have had board members removed from the board by not taking their training. So the School Ethics Commission, just briefly so you know, is made up of 9 members that are appointed by the governor for a 3-year term, and no more than 5 of them can be from any one political party. And you'll see that 2 of them are school board members. I went way too far. 2 of them are school administrators, and 5 of them are non-school officials. And they will then determine those cases. And they really look at 2 areas, the first of which is advisory opinions. And an advisory opinion is requested by a school official. So a board member can request an advisory opinion, and the superintendent or the VA can request an advisory opinion to make a decision or a determination if any proposed activity or conduct by a school official in the same district would constitute a violation of the act. And if the advisory opinion is considered to be something that is far-reaching, that all board members need to have notice of, those advisory opinions can be made public. They need 6 votes from the School Ethics Commission, but most times that advisory opinion is private between the individual who requested and the individual that the request was made to. But if it is, as I said, far-reaching enough, they will make it. And then they also hear school ethics complaints. And they are filed by anyone. They can be filed by a staff member, a community member, if they feel that a board member has violated the code of ethics. Michael, I don't know if you want to jump in here at any point to cover either the complaints or the advisory opinions.
Well, let me just, the 2 things I do want to cover. One is dealing with both the advisory and the ethics complaints themselves. And then I'm sure you have a slide also of the code of ethics for what I call the 10 commandments. And then I will go through those 10 commandments for the 10 paragraphs under the code of ethics. With regard to the advisory opinions, and this is something that this school district certainly has done in the past, and most school districts utilize this tool as a way of ensuring that violations don't occur. And the way that you go ahead and do that is you file these advisory opinions before something happens that you plan to do or something is planned to occur, so as to determine, so to get an opinion from the School Ethics Commission before you do something wrong. And so this is basically a great preventative measure that is provided. Back in the day, these decisions used to be turned out. Once you send it in, you would get a response within a few weeks or a month. Now, under the current circumstances, they've still been pretty good in getting back to you, certainly within 6 to 8 weeks with regard to a response. And the framing of that letter is always the most important part to ensure that you're giving the facts as are true, and the incidents that you're either proposing to do or may do in the future with specificity, because the Ethics Commission is very, very good in giving you specific answers to the specific questions that you pose. advisory opinions are a very, very good tool to use. Because what you're trying to do is avoid the next one, which is the ethics complaints. And again, those complaints can be filed by anybody. Of course, as they tell you in law school, the first day you go to law school, anybody could sue anybody for anything. The question is there some validity to the complaint, and is there some substance there that would render it important to review more than just perfunctory review and a dismissal? So again, even though anyone can file a complaint, the Ethics Commission is very diligent in reviewing the complaint. It gives the board member who the charge is levied against the opportunity to provide a written response to the charge, and that is done in private, basically, where the complaint is not supposed to be publicized or released, and the response provided by the board member is not to be released unless or until the Ethics Commission determines that there is some merit to the case, that if all the facts as alleged are true, and there's no, even if there's a factual dispute, but the legal consequences based upon the allegations of facts as set forth, if those would constitute a violation of any of the, what I said before, were the 10 Commandments, then they would then either issue a determination summarily or provide a fact-finding opportunity to go through all the facts to determine whether the facts as alleged are accurate or not, or somewhere in between, and then render a determination. So those are the two different procedures. Advisory opinions are for things that have not yet happened or that may happen, and you're looking for advice as to what you can or can't do in the future. And the ethics complaints are actually the allegation that somebody did something wrong in violation of one of the 10 Code of Ethics. Do you have another slide, Kathy, with regard to the actual 10 provisions?
Yes, I do have those there.
So why don't you go through this first, and then when you get to that, I'll pick up from there.
Okay. So this was the only advisory opinion that was issued in 2019, where it talks about there was a board member who drives a bus that transports their district students, but is employed by an outside company. And it went on to explain that the member has no ownership in the company with no financial benefit other than pay. And he was not, or she was not, supervised by district staff, but administration can request that a driver be removed from district routes, and the driver may have to write a report for student behavior issues and give direction to the district's aides who ride the bus. But when those were presented to the School Ethics Commission, what they determined was that the member is a private employee of a private company doing their job that includes casual temporary contact with students and aides over whom there is limited authority. But they went on to say that the board member needs to refrain from any discussion or vote of transportation issues involving the bus company and issues involving specific students, aides on the route. So as Michael said, the importance of the advisory opinions, I feel they are a way to protect your rights, to not be able to take any voting rights away from you. So the advisory opinion, as Michael said, should be looked at as a friend. The only thing I would ever caution, and Michael said, you have to do it beforehand. It's not something that you request an advisory opinion and hold it in a back pocket until a board member actually does that board member does some kind of behavior and then flip it out and say, I got you. That's not what the purpose of that advisory opinion is. They do, depending on if they feel a violation has occurred, there are penalties that can be imposed upon board members, and it has to go to the commissioner for the final decision, and you are able to appeal a decision that is made. But you can see they can reprimand board members, which really means is like a slap on the wrist saying, shame on you, you shouldn't have behaved in that manner. They can censure board members, which is a formal disapproval by the commissioner that is publicized by adoption of a resolution. So that has to be put in a resolution at a board meeting. They can suspend board members, and they will recommend a length of suspension. And they can also remove board members from the board if the violation is really considered to be a severe breach. So here you go, Michael. Here are our 10 commandments.
All right. So some of them are rather simplistic, some of them are easy to understand, other are a bit more complex and layered, but I do like to call them the 10 Commandments. And rather than just reading them and not going through them, I'm going to read through each one of them individually. And obviously some of them, as I said, are fairly self-explanatory. I will uphold and enforce all the laws, rules, and regulations of the State Board of Education and court orders pertaining to schools. Desired changes shall be brought about only through legal and ethical procedures. Again, makes a lot of common sense. Everybody understands what that is. You're taking an oath when you get elected to this office, and that oath has to be followed, that you're going to follow all the laws of the state of New Jersey and the Constitution of New Jersey, so that A is rather self-explanatory. Go on to B. I will make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children and seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all children regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing. Again, rather self-explanatory. I don't think very many ethics cases that are filed or complaints that are filed ever really deal with paragraph B, because these would have to be so egregious that they'd be rather simplistic to resolve, and anybody who would be doing something like that probably wouldn't be waiting for an ethics charge to be filed against them before they're leaving the Board of Education, to be frank with everyone. C, I will confine my board action to policy-making, planning, and appraisal, and I will help to frame policy and plans only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them. And this is one of those where we start to get into more of the layers that I was referring to before. Basically, this is the first of several codes of ethics that deal with the micromanaging of the district by board members. And these are where the code of ethics do come into play. And you will see a majority of the cases that are filed are either under paragraphs C, G, or J, and you'll see what those are after we get through them. But basically, this is the harbinger of the other micromanaging provisions in the Code of Ethics that basically say that board members, the role of the board member is to make sure that the district is well run, and the administration runs the district. Board members are not supposed to be micromanaging the school district. There are people that are employed by the district that are paid money, taxpayer money, to make sure that the district is well run, and that those policies and procedures that the Board of Education adopt, because that's what the Board of Education is. It's a policy-making organization. Those policies that are developed and approved by the board are then implemented by the administration, implemented by the teachers and the other employees of the school district. Those things should never really be intertwined or get clouded, and if everyone maintains their role as to what they're supposed to do, there should never be a problem with paragraph C, because the board member will confine their actions to policy making, planning, and appraisal. And therefore we leave it to the experts and the people who we pay money to do those things that will effectuate those policies and plannings that the Board of Education undertakes. D, I will carry out my responsibility not to administer the schools, but together with my fellow board members to see that they are well run. Again, something that is dealing with the board members, leaving it to the administration to do what they're supposed to do, to make sure that the administration does what they have been hired to do. And there should be no direct, this is really where the chain of command starts to come into play. Because you're not administering the district. As I said, we're policy planning, as we saw under paragraph C, and now we're letting the administration do their job, and we are not micromanaging, and we are going through the chain of command, which we'll see in later provisions and in later paragraphs, that basically identify everybody's role as to what they're supposed to do. And that, when I say everyone, we're including obviously the board members' roles, the administration's roles, the employees' roles, and obviously also the community's roles in this.
And I think it's important for board members to understand that they are not to be giving direct orders to school district personnel.
That is correct.
Or for something to be perceived as giving direction to school personnel, and the board gives direction to the superintendent. So
no single board member should be representing or making any representations without full board authorization, because a single board member is just that, a single board member, and it takes a majority of the board to do anything, including passing those policies that we were talking about before. So therefore, the paragraph D is referring to, more than anything else, is that together with my fellow board members, we're going to see that it is well run, because independently or singularly, that individual board member has no power or control over how the district should operate. E, I will recognize that authority rests with the Board of Education, and I will make no personal promises nor take any private action that may compromise the board. And again, one of those that get very layered after a while when you're dealing with conflicts of interest that Kathy was referring to before, because of either economic interests or the like. And you saw the one advisory opinion about the bus driver. So therefore, even though at first blush certain things may seem to be a violation of this provision, if you get pick through it and go through some of the previously made decisions by the School Ethics Commission, you will find that that is not as easily determined as you may think. So we're going to deal with these private actions and promises for personal gain, or promises. Sometimes it may not be what it first appears to look like to everyone once you peel the onion away a little bit. I will refuse to surrender my independent judgment to special interests or partisan political groups, or to use the schools for personal gain or for the gain of friends. Again, what we were talking about, E and F are always in companion with each other whenever there are complaints filed, because E and F seem to really refer to the same issue about the personal gain and personal interests. The partisan political group issue, certainly when the school ethics, the Code of Ethics were adopted back in 2001, I think it was. When they were first adopted, obviously elections were held in April throughout the state. Now that they have moved to November, that partisan political group issue may have again become a little bit clouded, but the idea is still the same, that it's supposed to be independent judgment without special interests, indicating how you are going to work as a board member, how you're going to act and vote as a board member on the various issues that would come before you. That's, again, one of those more clouded ones that you'll see in cases that are filed. G is I will hold, by the way, G is the one that you probably have the most violations when there are violations, not necessarily just complaints, but violations of the Code of Ethics when complaints are actually filed. G, I will hold confidential all matters pertaining to the schools which, if disclosed, would needlessly injure individuals or the schools. In all other matters, I will provide accurate information and in concert with my fellow board members, you see that phrase there again, interpret to the staff the aspirations of the community for its schools. Confidentiality, the executive sessions that Board of Educations undertake are sacred. Those meetings are supposed to be held in confidence. The old expression of what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas certainly applies to Board of Education executive sessions, to the point that you should not be conversing or discussing in any way any issues that are discussed in executive session with your friends, with your neighbors, even with your spouse or your children. Those executive session discussions, as clearly is defined here, are confidential, and anybody who talks about things outside of the executive session, where they would have obtained that information in executive session, could come back and needlessly injure, for example, students in the district. Let's say you're at a community event and you're talking about a certain student that you learned about in executive session who was either classified or was disciplined or had a suspension hearing, and that comes up during your conversation, during your get-together with your friends and neighbors. That's a clear violation of Section G of the Code of Ethics, and it needlessly could injure, and it doesn't have to even establish that that person was physically or emotionally injured, but it would needlessly injure individuals in the school. So we have to, again, keep mindful of the fact that these Code of Ethics are there to keep board members on the straight and narrow and not to veer off in any way where they could be held responsible for a violation. And as I said, I think G is the one that is the one that usually is filed against board members, and the ones that are more sustained than others. H, I will vote to appoint the best qualified personnel available after consideration of the recommendation of the chief school administrator. This really gets to the crux of the matter when I'm talking about micromanaging and the idea that board members can only vote yes or no when it comes to a personnel issue, a recommendation by the chief school administrator, because the law specifically says that only the chief school administrator can recommend people for employment. That recommendation comes from the superintendent, and the Board of Education can only vote yes, can only vote no, or can abstain on that particular matter. They can't say, you know what, we don't like Mr. Jones, we would prefer you to select Mrs. Smith, and we're going to vote no to Mr. Jones, and we're going to now put in Mr. Smith and vote yes for him, even if we have 9 board members that agree with that, because that would be a clear violation not only of the state statute, because only the superintendent can recommend personnel, but it obviously would also be a clear violation of the Code of Ethics under Section I here. So that is something that you must always remember, that you will not take your preferences over that of the superintendent. The only thing you can do is, after full consultation, you can certainly not have to agree with the superintendent with their recommendation, but you cannot put somebody in place of the superintendent's recommendation. And finally, we have letter J, and that's it. And again, this is one of the, I think the reason they left this one for last is because it really summarizes the issues that we were talking about throughout this. I will refer all complaints to the Chief Administrative Officer and will act on the complaints at public meetings only after failure of an administrative solution. Again, this one is one of those that deals with not only the chain of command, but the micromanaging. The chain of command is a very, very essential element to this, because board members have to remember that because we can't act independently, and community members must understand that board members can't act independently, there really serves no useful purpose in board members giving any extended or extensive response to community members' individual requests to board members. I know that that is very difficult, and the reason it's probably the most difficult for elected officials, and certainly for board members in particular, is the reason you're in that job is just because you care. Board members run not for any salary or any remuneration whatsoever, and as the years have passed, you get even less and less, not even a sandwich, but it's because you care and you're concerned about your community. Concern is in your blood. So when a community member has a problem and comes forward to you and says, I have a problem with something that's going on in the district, every good person's reaction, and certainly board members' reactions first are, let me try to help you. Let me try to solve your problem. The problem with solving their problem is Section J of the Code of Ethics. You're supposed to refer all complaints to the chief school administrator, and you'll act on the complaints in a board meeting only after there has been a failure of a solution administratively. In addition, your district has policy number 9130 that basically mirrors the Code of Ethics under Section J, and ironically, your policy 9130 was adopted back in 1976 and was revised again in 1990. The reason I'm saying those dates is you'll recall that the Code of Ethics weren't even established until 2001. So Ocean Township already had on the books something very, very similar to Section J because of its importance. Part of what your public complaints in general section says under 9130 is, where a parent or a member of the community is not in agreement with a decision that has been rendered, they are requested to submit their complaint to the person who was directly responsible for the original decision. If still not satisfied, the complaint shall be submitted to the appropriate supervisor, building principal, the superintendent, and, if necessary, to the president of the board. And then it summarizes the entire policy with, the board will not consider or act on complaints that have not been explored at the appropriate administrative levels. So Ocean Township had the same Section J in its policy for all intents and purposes since 1976. Good for you guys, Ocean Township. Because again, this is really where you've got to remember what everybody's role is as I started this discussion. And the role is board members do what board members do. The employees and administrators do what they're supposed to do. And the community certainly has a right to do what they want to do. And again, board members are going to be hit with these questions. What do you do when a community member asks you? And after you give them the polite, I understand, let me take care of this. To take care of this part is only going to be, I'm going to forward it to the superintendent, or you're going to advise the community member that you're going to have to go to the teacher or the principal or whoever under policy 9130 was where the original decision came from. Because that's not only what your policy requires board members to do, but it also is what Section J of the Code of Ethics requires you to do. So there are going to be these back and forths or these communications between either employees or citizens of the community and the board and individual board members. I assume they're going to be unsolicited because they should never be solicited. But if they are even unsolicited, what should be done is a copy of that email or communication should go to the superintendent to cover the board members with regard to what did you do when you got this email or communication from either a community member or an employee. You can show that you forwarded it to the superintendent, and you can show that you responded that said, go back to the principal, go back to the teacher, go back to where the original decision was made, because that's all I can do at this point. However, after a failure of an administrative solution, it will come before the Board of Education. And if it does, that's when the Board of Education would have a right to deal with it. Again, not as an individual board member, but as a public body trying to respond and trying to meet the needs of the community, if it can be met, if it can't already be resolved through the administrative channels.
Michael, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So on that, when you say it comes to the board when been resolved, if it hasn't been resolved, it's just that the whoever it is, the teacher, the community member, whoever, just isn't happy with the decision, like, it still comes to the board for us to make a decision, even if we just want to be able to hear it because how does that work?
Well, again, let's be clear, because the word decision was nothing that I said here, either in section J or in 9130. The board is not permitted to even consider or act on the complaint until it's gone through those particular procedures. The board could be very satisfied with how it was determined by the administration to be finalized or resolved, or not resolved, and then the board doesn't need to do anything with that. The board certainly still has an obligation to hear the community, but that doesn't mean the board necessarily either has to agree, and again, it's the board as a body that would do that. And depending on the issue, obviously if it's a student matter, it would be something that would be discussed in executive session. If it's an employee matter, it's something that would be discussed in executive session. If it's a policy matter, well, then it's something that is not an executive session issue, but then the Board of Education would have an open dialogue and discussion after it's gone through the administrative review with regard to those who implement the policy as to whether they want to change the policy or not. And that would be a public discussion. Again, not necessarily saying that the board would have to or should agree with the complaint that has been lodged as to what the current policy says or what it requires people to do, but certainly the board is under an obligation, certainly as elected officials, to at least hear the employee or the community member. And I don't want to, one other point, and I did want to make this earlier. There's a difference between the employees and the community members as to what the process is and what the chain of command is. Employees' chain of command normally is covered by their collective bargaining agreement. An employee, if they have a complaint about what's going on with their principal, their coworker, or an administrator of a higher level, or the board, has a collective bargaining agreement in most cases where there are procedures that have been bargained by their representatives and the Board of Education as to what those procedures for resolution are supposed to be, and they do not include contacting the Board of Education either individually or collectively at the same time or prior to going through those procedural channels that need to be followed pursuant to the collective bargaining agreement. Now, obviously, community members don't have a collective bargaining agreement to follow, but they do have policy 9130 to follow by the community members, and the board members have that and section J to follow as well. So,
thank you. I just have a question. It's Grace Down.
Sure.
So, how would that work with, say, special education, where a parent is unhappy with an IEP or, something in that matter?
That's a great example, because if a parent has a problem with an IEP and comes to the board member and says, I have a problem with the IEP, again, under section J and under 9130, the board member's only response is, I think you got to go back to the child study team. I really can't discuss this with you. I apologize. The board member should be forwarding that email or that communication to the superintendent to cover themselves, to know that they did not take it under their own wing or take the ball and start to run with it with regard to trying to assist the parent with the child's IEP, because that is clearly a micromanaging and a breach of the chain of command, because an individual board member should not be dealing with another student's IEP unless it's your own student's IEP.
Right, so once it gets to that point and then goes to the superintendent, then what happens?
Well, in all likelihood, those kinds of situations means we're going to be winding up in some kind of litigation, and you'll be dealing with your special ed counsel at that point. Again, there shouldn't be an individual board member's discussion, and the board as a whole would probably be discussing the merits of whether we're going to be going to litigation over this matter, or we're going to be resolving this matter short of litigation if it gets that far.
Thank you.
All right, I think those are the top 10.
Okay, any questions on the top 10? If not, we'll move,
Well, just so you know, we do get sandwiches, Michael. Just wanted to make that point clear.
That's
Some
enough
districts,
argument
some
to-
districts won't even do that anymore.
the next couple of slides are really to show you some of the School Ethics Commission commissioner decisions. The first one, as Michael said, was a board member shared information about a student discipline incident with his immediate family, which was then shared with countless others. And so whenever the School Ethics Commission reviewed that, they said, yes, it was a violation of the Code of Ethics and that board member was censured. The second one was a board member approached a subordinate employee of the superintendent to ask if she would be interested in assuming the position of superintendent, chief school administrator, even though the position wasn't vacant. Again, they found that to be a violation of Code E, of the Code of Ethics E and I, and that board member was reprimanded. A board member attended a local teachers union meeting without board approval and told the teachers that they had the board's support and that the board was exploring all options to remove the superintendent. Again, that was one of the violations, and that was Code of Ethics Tenet D and E, and that board member was suspended from the board for 60 days. And during a traffic stop, a member presents herself as a board member and indicates her relationship to a local official and used inappropriate language. And that one was a violation of E and F, and they were given a 30-day suspension from the board. So we really have to be careful about our behavior. But the one thing I did want to say about G, that has to do with confidentiality, is, to really, as Michael said, be really careful about the conversations that you're having, because sometimes things happen inadvertently. But there was one incident where a board member was, I guess, having a phone conversation with another board member on the phone, but they were unaware that there were little ears that were listening in on the conversation, and the owner of those little ears went into school the next day and proceeded to tell their teacher what they overheard during their parents' phone conversation. So that one with G, just, I can't reiterate enough how important it is that if you're discussing something in closed session, and there are only, is it 7, Michael, areas that the board has in closed session, so you really have to make sure that they stay within closed session. The final one that was a decision that was made was a member's wife was a teacher in school, and he owns a business near the school, so he regularly entered the school without following the visitation policy or procedures, and met with the school secretary to encourage him to make a statement that he was being blackmailed by administration to keep an incident hidden.
Freaking soap opera was that in?
I know. Some of them, some of them are really wild and unbelievable. But as you can see, he was in violation of pretty much every single tenet of the Code of Ethics. There's B, there's D, there's E, there's I, and there's J. And he was censured, but only because when the decision was made, he was no longer on the board. So you have to be really careful about when you visit the school as board members. And so I always like to say to board members that you need to remember that really the only time that you're really a board member is when you're seated at a legally constituted meeting of the Board of Education where there's a quorum present. At any other time, you're just like John Q. Butler. And so if you have procedures that any public member has to go through in order to enter a building, unless you have been invited into the district, specifically, you still have to go through those procedures in order to come into the building. So the other thing is with they did not support school personnel in attempts to enforce policy to know who's in the building. They undermine the authority of the school personnel managing the building to assure the safety and orderly conduct. So we have to be careful. And then the meetings with the school secretary, he became involved in the day-to-day operations of the district. He did not support or he undermined the administration, who may have been conducting their own investigation, and they made promises and sought to obtain information in a private setting. So we really do have to be careful. And the other thing I always tell board members about going into a building is, even if you're there as a parent and you can tell staff, and I have very personal experience about this particular issue, that no matter how many times you said, I'm here as Eric and Mark's mother, the staff does not, once you become elected to the board, you no longer are Eric and Mark's mom. They still see you, no matter what, as a board member. And for newer staff members, board members make them nervous because they haven't attained tenure. And if you're in the building or you're in the classroom, whatever it is that you're doing, they're wondering, well, why is this board member here? They're not connecting that you're not there as a board member, you're there as a parent. So that piece becomes really careful. And so, I always, as a former board member, I always made it a habit that if I was going into the building, and it didn't matter whether I was being there to attend a program, whether I was going to something that was going on in my son's classroom, no matter what it was that I was doing, that I was going to be in a building, I always let the superintendent know. Because sometimes, especially if you're going through difficult negotiations or whatever, people are very quick to call the superintendent to say, hey, there's a board member here in my building, do you know why they're here? So just be really careful with that. Conflicts of interest. Michael, I'm gonna let you talk about conflicts of interest.
Or not.
Let me unmute myself here.
Okay.
All right, now I'm unmuted, which some people would not be very happy about. So I want to make sure also everybody understands there's a difference between when you're disqualified as a board member. I'm going to go off road here a little second. Disqualified as a board member is different than if you have a conflict as a board member, because there are certain things that would disqualify you from even serving on the Board of Education. We're not talking about those kind of things here. What we're talking about here is what will require you once you are serving on the board, because you are qualified to be on the board. There may be certain situations where you need to recuse yourself from the certain board's actions based upon some conflict that you have. Normally those conflicts would be dealing with family members or immediate family members that may have some involvement in the district, either through a business relationship or through being an employee in the district. As most of you know, you can become a board member even after a relative of yours or even an immediate family member of yours is employed by the district, but it can't be vice versa. you can't get on the board and then hire a immediate family member or relative of yours at that point in time. But if you're on the board, if you get elected to the board after one of your relatives or immediate family members were already working for the district, there's no disqualification board member, and there will be conflicts that you have to deal with regard to what you can or can't vote on in certain situations. And these are just some of them here. The idea of defining a relative versus an immediate family member is what makes lawyers earn a lot of money in New Jersey, because there is quite a bit of ambiguity in the law right now and in the regulations that have been promulgated and in the definitions that have been provided by various administrative agencies. So I certainly can go through this chart, but I will tell you without hesitation that next week that might change, because there have been probably 6 different variations and interpretations of the terms immediate family member and relative as it relates to Board of Education members and whether they are in a conflict of interest situation. But basically, because you see this says of the accountability regulation definition, you notice accountability regulation is not the Code of Ethics. It is not under other statutes where it defines the conflicts that I was referring to before. So this one's only under the accountability regulation. It defines spouses, civil union, or domestic partners in one category, parents, step-parents, children, stepchildren, son, daughter-in-law, grandparent, grandchild, sibling, stepbrother, sisters, half-brother, sister, aunt, uncle, niece, nephew, and that's why it's not on here, and in some cases, cousins, which is not on here, which is why I said that there's been these different definitions and variations on the theme. But basically, this is what we're going to use as a relative in the district with regard to action. The footnote there you see at the bottom, the asterisk, makes things even more complicated and more convoluted, because all of these relations that are in the boxes are further defined as whether they are related to the school official or spouse partner by blood, marriage, or adoption. So if it's my sister's husband's,
Oh, Jesus.
that's through marriage. So therefore it still qualifies. If it's my wife's sister's husband, it's still through blood and then marriage. So it will go on and on and on until they make further clarifications on these. But basically, if you stick within the boxes above, you'll be in good shape. And then you're going to call the attorneys to interpret whether it's by blood or marriage or adoption, which takes us further through everyone's lineage. May not hire a relative of a board member or chief school administrator. This is what I was referring to before. So I think we can go through that. I didn't see all of Kathy's slides in advance.
No, that's okay. But the piece about you can't hire a relative of a board member or a chief school administration, and in parentheses, we have here that there may be exceptions. But in order for those exceptions to happen, it has to go to the county superintendent for approval. So say a position, I always like to use like AP Physics. You can't find a teacher, but one of the board members' children just graduated, with honors from, Stanford with this degree in teaching physics. Then the superintendent, after going through the hiring process, if this is the only person that really meets the criteria for the position, then the superintendent has to go to the county office. They have to explain their process, how many people came in, and that this was the only person that met the criteria. After the executive county superintendent gives the okay, can the superintendent then recommend that person for the position? So, and as Michael says, is if there is a relative that's working in the district, you know, that board member cannot participate in any employment matters that concern the superintendent or any supervisors in the chain of command between the relative and the superintendent. So the board member would not be able to participate in the superintendent's evaluation, anything to do with their contract. If the superintendent had merit goals, the board member would not be able to participate in that either. So it really becomes important.
Or the evaluation of the superintendent.
Right, so none of that. So it's important, you know, for us to make sure as board members that doesn't happen. Collective bargaining, so you'll see with the grid that is here, depending on the relationship to the board member, it really indicates as to whether you can participate in negotiations or not. So if it's, you know, a parent dependent child, a child that's not dependent, or a relative that works within your district, you can't participate in negotiations, nor can you vote to ratify the contract. If it's out of district, you cannot participate in negotiations, but you can vote to ratify the contract as long as you meet the requirements of the asterisk. That's absent another conflict, or after the memorandum of agreement, salary guides, the whole package has been agreed upon. And then the same thing with a child who's not dependent or a relative that works out of district, you will be able to participate. So what I would say to you is when it comes time for negotiations and you're not sure whether you can participate or not, you need to have that conversation with them.
And it's very simple these days because that chart that you just saw before is actually specifically from a decision that was provided by the School Ethics Commission A2417. And there's a chart there that you can just mix and match your criteria to see whether you can or can't participate either in the negotiations or to ultimately vote on the contract.
Other conflicts that may occur, whether it's supervised by employees in the district, they're not in the unit, but the terms of employment are linked to the unit, or immediate family member or relative has a heightened union involved. They may be, you know, president of your teachers association. We have A10-18 here, just, you know, to call attention. Prior to 2018, there was an advisory opinion that came out that said that if a board member had been endorsed by the Teachers Association, that they couldn't participate in negotiations for a year after they came on the board. But A10-18 took that away. And so it really does not, they said it does not create a per se future conflict unless a financial contribution is given and is intended to influence the board.
Yeah, it's the and part it's the and that's the tricky part.
And is intended to influence the board member, right. Doctrine of necessity, I mean, that is to be invoked. Yes, you go right ahead, Michael.
Okay. The doctrine of necessity is when a majority of the full board is in conflict on the particular issue that you're being asked to review or to vote upon. The doctrine can only be invoked by the Board of Education if you have, in your case, 5 of your 9 members have a conflict, and you have to identify in a resolution and public statement what that conflict actually is for each of those 5 members, which would then permit all 9 members to participate in the action. It doesn't necessarily only deal with negotiations, although usually that's the case because of these conflicts that might occur. but it could be for any situation where the board can't act due to other reasons for a conflict of interest. So therefore, if that ever occurs, it's always advisable that at the beginning of each organization meeting for boards, that it is determined whether there are 5 members who have conflicts for any particular bargaining unit that may be up for negotiations that year, so that you can properly prepare as you get into the year for negotiations to adopt the appropriate resolution, make the appropriate public statements to invoke the doctrine of necessity. That doesn't mean that by invoking the doctrine of necessity, because again, remember the charts where you can participate in the negotiation, or you can't participate in the negotiation, but you might be able to vote on the contract. So you might be in a situation where you might not have enough board members to necessarily discuss or negotiate the contract with a full membership, but you only need the full membership to ratify or vote on the contract. So you could have a board committee for negotiations as few as 1 person if you wanted to, because again, people who have conflicts without invoking the doctrine of necessity shouldn't be participating in the negotiation process. So given that other parameter, I think it's there just to let you know that even 1 member could be sufficient to conduct or work through a negotiation committee formation if necessary, without having to invoke the doctrine of necessity, or if you can't invoke the doctrine of necessity.
So just conflicts knowledge check. A relative is an immediate family member, true or false? That one happens to be false because you can have a relative who is not an immediate family. The board may not employ a relative of a board member or the chief school administrator. And that's true. When a majority of the board members are conflicted, the doctrine of necessity may be invoked so that the board can form a negotiations committee. And as Michael just explained, that's false because you can have a committee of 1. A board member whose wife's aunt is a paraprofessional in the district may not participate in the evaluation of the school administrator. So when you go back and you look at the chart, you'll see that the aunt was listed as that family member that would create the conflict.
Blood or marriage.
A board member is a teacher in a neighboring district. The member can participate in the negotiations process for the teacher's contract, but cannot vote on the final contract. That's false. It's actually the reverse. They cannot participate in the negotiations, but if there's no conflicts, they can vote on the final contract. The assistant superintendent may not evaluate the principal in the building where the assistant superintendent's son is a teacher, and that's true. So, these conflicts show up all over the place. Michael, do you want to talk about volunteering?
I can. I'm not sure what you're talking about with volunteering because I haven't seen this particular slide, but I would certainly say that volunteerism is what this country was built upon. And of course, there are always some concerns about whether PTA, PTO members and board members can be the same person or hold the same position. And again, I'm not even sure what your slides is, Kathy, so I don't want to say too much.
No, that's okay. So I think it's important when this, first came out, the volunteering came the advisory opinion came from a district here in Monmouth County. And there was a gentleman who sat on a board, and he was an older gentleman who was a philatelist, a stamp collector, and he wanted to start a club for students in the district so that they could become interested in stamp collecting. He did it within the school, and actually he would meet with the kids in the teachers' lounge, which created a problem with this board member being not only in the building, but he was supervising students, and he was holding the meetings in the teacher's lounge. So they requested an advisory opinion, and they came back, the School Ethics Commission came back and told the board member that really he shouldn't be volunteering. He needed to either be a board member or he needed to be a volunteer. And this board member, believe it or not, gave up his seat on the board so that he could remain working with the students in the stamp collecting
I
club.
really love those stamps.
So what ended up happening was, there was this whole rash of things that they told board members they couldn't do. You couldn't be a class mom or dad. You couldn't, go and be a chaperone on school trips. And, there were all kinds of things when it first came out that they told board members they couldn't do. But after they went back and looked at it, they said board members really could be involved in the PTA, PTO, Home and School Association, and they could hold an officer's position. However, when the votes would come up before the board, they really needed to remove themselves and not vote on the issues. But there are certain things that they tell you that as board members you shouldn't be doing. And that really is based on the involvement with students and staff and the degree with which you have authority to give or receive directions to and from students and staff. And also, one of the things that they talked about is the collection of money. So if you are involved in the PTO, PTA, you're a band parent, sports booster or whatever, if you are doing activities within that group to make sure that you are not handling any funds. So just to be mindful about that. So one of the things that we came up with here, is to go back with the school ethics advisory opinion on volunteering, and they said, here's a host of questions to ask yourself. Whether, if your answers are different than these from above, then it could well be that it could be an issue with your role as a board member. So if you have any questions, and what I'm going to do is tomorrow, I'm going to email the PowerPoint to you all so that you have this to go back and refer to. But if you have any questions, if you're doing any volunteering in the school, either talk to the superintendent or talk to your attorney to see if it could potentially be an issue. Interview, yes.
Sorry, I thought you were getting to
No,
this.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I thought you were at the end of this one. I was just gonna say, when we get to the end of the ethics part, can we table the other discussion till later in the meeting? Because we have a lot of people on here that I know have questions for Dr. Spangler, probably.
Sure.
Okay.
We're almost finished. So interview committees, board member in interviews for positions other than superintendent is not encouraged. There are some exceptions to that, and so they are referring you to guidelines and advisory opinion 0412. And that really talks about 1 or 2 board members in administrative staff coordinates and participation. You are only there to observe and assess, and then the superintendent makes the recommendation. Some districts do exit interviews whenever staff leaves the district. Absolutely no participation in an exit interview by board members. Points to consider is, for boards to develop a list of board members and administrators who have conflicts and review it regularly. We always say to board members, keep that inventory of family members, and if you have any questions, go to your board attorney on any of those conflicts. And just keep abreast through school board notes, because if advisory opinions are made public, they are always put into school board notes. And as I said back in the beginning, those are really when they're published for board members to say, hey, board members, you are now put on notice about this particular set of circumstances, and if they would come to us, you know, via a school ethics complaint, this is most likely how we would move. So those are always really important to keep up to date. And the other thing is that school officials must always be cognizant of their responsibility to protect public trust and to honor their obligation to serve the interest of the public and the board, and to periodically reevaluate the existence of potential conflicts. So that's always, you know, needs to be part of what we do on an ongoing basis. And then when you get the PDF of the PowerPoint, it has all of these links that you could go and actually read the actual decisions from some of the cases that came up that we mentioned in the PowerPoint. So that's really the ethics. Michael, I don't know if you have any last minute words of wisdom to the board members as we finish this up.
Be careful out there.
Good advice.
Oh man, thank you. Thank you, Michael, for that. And thank you, Kathy, so much. Does any board members have any questions specifically to this presentation that you want to ask before we move back through the agenda, and we'll come back to Kathy in a little bit. Did I freeze?
No, none here.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Kathy, we'll come back. Dr. Stankiewicz, can we get to your superintendent's report?
Certainly. I don't know why so many people have so many questions. It's been a very uneventful couple of days. So, obviously, my letter went out this evening, describing where we are with some of the cases of COVID which have presented themselves among our student population. The first one being last Thursday. We outlined that in correspondence on Friday. We found out yesterday afternoon that we had a second case among the student population that appeared to be connected to the first case. As I was finishing the draft of my letter this morning, we were notified of a third case. So we spent the day today, and before we do anything, I'm not sure if Nan Paris is on this, but I want to thank Nan, who's the nurse at the high school, who has just done an amazing job working with the Monmouth County Regional Health Commission. I want to thank Dawn Kasuba, who I know is on this call. I see her right there, who has done just an amazing job working with the folks at the Health Commission and her staff. And everyone at the high school for their patience through this process. So we got that word of a third student today, also apparently connected to the first two cases. So we've been working all day with the Monmouth County Regional Health Commission, and our case actually was elevated up to the state epidemiologist. So folks in Trenton know what's going on in their district. And so it wasn't until late this afternoon, about 4:30, that they contacted me back so we could discuss what some of the recommendations were for days moving forward, particularly with the high school. Let me be clear that there's no issues at any of the other schools at this time. And so we're really talking about Ocean Township High School. So the first two cases, even though they involved our students, were really considered non-school transmissions because the students were not in the schools, even though one was involved in an extracurricular activity. It wasn't until this third case that it really became an in-school situation. Even with that, the state epidemiologist, along with the Health Commission, felt that this was isolated within one group of students within the school, and so it was their recommendation that we did not have to go to all remote learning. It was not something that they felt that they could support, but we felt locally that there were a lot of factors that warranted at least some short-term move to remote learning, and we felt a few days beyond tomorrow, which was a regularly scheduled remote learning day, was appropriate. And of course, the district is closed on Monday for Yom Kippur, so in essence, it kind of goes through Tuesday. But for all intents and purposes, through the end of the week, and the commission and the state epidemiology folks, really the local commission at this point, felt that they saw why we felt that taking a few days to be on remote learning at the high school was appropriate. For a couple different reasons. One, I think most importantly, to ensure that we have quarantined the people that need to be quarantined, and that we won't see any additional cases. And in fact, if we do see any additional cases, that we can then work with them to take the appropriate action. Also, they are still investigating some contact tracing. We thought that it was appropriate to take some time to ensure that process was finished and completed. So we just ultimately thought it was in the best interest, the health and safety of our students, our staff, our community, to go to an all remote model for just through the end of the week. And so that is what we've decided to do. And they did support that. The commission did support that, and we felt that was the best course of action moving forward. I want to stress that once again, all the schools will be on remote learning tomorrow, and that is a normal process for us on Wednesdays. It'll be an early dismissal day as regularly scheduled for all students. And but on Thursday, the high school will continue on remote learning. It will be a full day of school on Thursday and Friday, remote, albeit all remote, but a full day for the high school, and then in-person hybrid full day for the 3 elementary schools and the intermediate school. So it is our hope and our expectation that we'll return to our hybrid model on Tuesday next week. But obviously, we'll continue to monitor what's going on within the district and monitor the cases and the kids. And if things change, then obviously we'll work with the commission to continue recommendations. But for right now, we feel very comfortable with this recommendation at this time. So happy to answer any questions from the board. Do you have any?
Yeah, I guess I have when we're looking at this, is the source coming from people participating in school activities, or kids participating in non-school activities, or what's the source?
It's our understanding that the initial source was completely from outside of the school community. Mm-hmm. And once again, we have to be very careful. We want to, people deserve their confidentiality. We need to maintain their confidentiality. So, I want to be careful with what I say here. But it's our belief that the initial case came from a source outside of the school community. The second case appears to be related to the first case, but also not contracted within the school community in any way. Those first 2 students, as we stated in our letters, had not been in school. And at least during the day had been involved in an extracurricular activity, and the other had not been in school at all. Yeah. And then the third student, that appears to have been. I mean, there's always a chance that it randomly occurred separate from this, but it appears that that was perhaps a contact at the extracurricular activity. Yeah.
There's a lot of things to unpack around this, right? So at one level right now, a lot of the teachers are feeling stressed because of the extended workday that they have to kind of go through, dealing with virtual and non-virtual settings, right? So that's something.
Yeah.
You hear about the parents in the K-4, K-5 area that have challenges.
Mhm.
So, and now this challenge, is something that, the idea of starting school in person and then stopping school because we have these incidents is something that somehow we have to figure out, or I guess communicate to either ourselves or the parents or the kids, the importance of being vigilant in this time, right?
Sure.
Otherwise, everybody's going to be jeopardizing a lot of things,
100%.
And so I'm not sure what our ability is to do that, but I like to figure out some course of action that we can do this with the PTA or with the other school officials or the student government, something that we can kind of rally the troops around this so we don't have this up and down thing that I'm nervous might happen.
Well, I think, obviously we're in an unpredictable time, and an unpredictable situation. The numbers, we work with the Township of Ocean, Office of Emergency Management. They come to our task force meetings each week, and we've been getting over the last so many weeks, reports on the number of active cases in Ocean Township. 2 weeks ago, that number was at a 6-month low. 6-month low. And in the last week or two, there's definitely been an uptick of some cases. We're still not talking nowhere near where they were in the spring, but an uptick. The age group that the majority of the cases were falling within were that 18 to 25 age group. And I think a lot of that stems from college returning, schools returning to campus and what have you. So, I'll be reaching out, and it was part of my second letter that kind of got scrapped because of the third case, but in the next couple of days we'll be, communicating with our community to, really be vigilant and use good judgment when it comes to, the interactions that are taking place, large groups, being around, I would highly recommend. I know for a lot of kids right now, they're trying to decide what colleges to go to. And they make college visits. It's part of what they do. We would recommend to take virtual tours of colleges right now and not directly visit college campuses. Obviously, I would hope we wouldn't have to say, don't engage in behavior like, parties and particularly indoor things and where you're bringing a lot of different kids together. I mean, that we would hope that would be common sense. But, right now, it's hard to.
I mean, are there other districts employing other methods or other strategies?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. But I think your point of working with student government and working with our organizations to try to impress upon. I will tell you once again, like when we had some situations arise over the summer, and we saw kids policing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We saw kids, hey, get your mask on. I can tell you in school, our kids follow the rules. And, I think Ms. Kasuba and Mr. Amato and the other principals could speak to that. We haven't had problems with kids wearing masks. We haven't had problems with kids, the lunchrooms have been very orderly and kids have done a great job. So I don't, in school, things have been going very well. And that really hasn't been a problem. Obviously, it's harder to control what goes on outside of school. And we really need everybody to work together. It's not that I haven't said this in correspondence that I put out there. I say it just about every time to say, look, we have to work together. You have to partner with us, and you have to do your part outside of school. We'll work hard to do our part inside of school, but everybody's got to work to help us.
Yeah, I think I don't want to blame the victim, right? So
no, of course not.
The person who comes down with it because they didn't do anything wrong. But I certainly want to make sure that the people who are if there's people who are being reckless on this, we got to figure out how to make sure that there's some consequences to this, other than people getting, other than putting their own self. I'm worried about people do things that put their own self in jeopardy. That's their choice. They start putting other people in jeopardy. That's not tolerable.
Well, and to your point, and let's be clear, there's no evidence to
Yes,
support
right,
that any
right.
of the students that
Right.
we're talking about right now
Correct.
fall under that category.
Right.
I think we're just speaking generally right now.
Correct, right.
Yeah, I mean, I think the vast majority of people want to do the right thing and are doing the right thing to the best of their ability. I believe that.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, we are limited to what we can do from a disciplinary standpoint of actions outside of campus. However, if kids are engaging in behavior that knowingly is potentially going to come back and impact the operations of the school district. So if they engage in behavior that, like attend parties or whatever, and when I say party, I'm not talking necessarily about a family gathering. I'm talking about a lot of kids together and not wearing masks and not doing things that for the most part they shouldn't be doing. If they engage in that behavior and then bring it back to school in the current climate, it could certainly be argued that behavior is potentially impacting the operations of the school, which we could consider to be a disciplinary infraction.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a definite. It would depend on a lot of different circumstances. But I not that we couldn't go there, but I think so many of our kids want to be in school. I mean, if there's one thing that we've heard a lot of things, but so many, not just of the kids, but our teachers, our parents, they want to be in school. So I don't think there's a lot of people out there knowingly being, negligent and disregarding the rules. As you could say, the most careful people could potentially become infected. So I will tell you that we saw a lot of responsibility from people once they thought that it was a possibility. A lot of good things, a lot of good decisions were made in terms of trying to minimize the impacts, right? So, we certainly can discuss that more with our families. I will be meeting with the PTA presidents in the next week or so I can absolutely have that conversation. And we can certainly, I would encourage, as I said, our principals are on here. I can encourage them to meet with their student groups and their parent groups. They all have pandemic response teams that are still active.
Yeah, and also, just as a board, I don't speak for everyone here, but let us know what we can do as individuals to spread the message or whatever that is. I don't know what the role for you.
Don't have any parties.
Don't have any parties.
That would be good.
Don't go to Joe's house.
Don't go to Joe's house.
Okay, any other questions from the board for Jana? And Jim, when you speak, can you speak up just a little bit more? Please?
Sure. I'm trying to talk into the mic. I'm trying to do that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mrs. Fuller?
Wearing the mask, trying to be responsible.
No, I understand.
Thank you. I guess more of a comment too, bridging off of what Mr. Weinstein just said. The response of our community here in helping us prevent the spread, just as important as that is our community's reaction to the cases that we already have. And I think we'll all say that we hope that these kids all recover quickly and that we don't have any more cases. But we have to be careful that we create an atmosphere that stays conducive to people reporting and feeling like they can and should test and can and should report if they feel like they were exposed to trigger the process that's necessary. So we have to make sure that we have, an atmosphere and dialogue that is conducive to people continuing to feel like they're going to be not attacked and welcomed if they do that. Because the only way that we can keep, or the district can keep, the quarantine moving forward as appropriate, contact tracing, et cetera, is if people are being honest and truthful about risk of exposure and or testing. So I think that's something we have to be mindful of too, how we can encourage that to continue.
Right, 100%, and I couldn't agree. And I think some of the things that have been out there on social media and have been said have been inaccurate, have in some cases been I think difficult. I think it's difficult if you're these individuals right now. I don't think they've asked for this, and they shouldn't be made to feel, in a way that they've done something, detrimental to our school community. I couldn't agree more. And so, I think we need to support these individuals, and we need to continue to be vigilant so that we don't have further spread. I think that's the key. So blaming isn't going to solve the problem. Acting and being positive and being proactive, moving forward will help the problem.
And the move to all virtual for the next 2 days includes all extracurricular sports.
Yeah, as I said in my letter, the sports, clubs and things were already virtual, but sports, athletics will be virtual for the next, can be virtual for the next couple of days. No in person. They can start back up as of Saturday, and that will. And there was just recent ruling from the NJSIAA. Typically, there's an amount of time that if you miss some time, if you're off, then there has to be 6 practices before a game. The NJSIAA softened that. They kind of backed off that a little bit. So in other words, none of our games that are starting next week or matches will have to be impacted as long as the schedule stays in place. In other words, we have tennis starting on Tuesday. Tennis match can happen on Tuesday. You don't have to have 6 practices before right now before a break, like a 3-day break or a 4-day break or whatever it is.
Okay, so athletics are resuming as of Saturday.
Saturday, correct.
So really the break is 3 days of...
Right, because if we had school Monday, we would have been back to school on Monday. It's only because we were off for the holiday that we're that. So we feel that Saturday is appropriate. Okay.
Thank you for that clarification.
And just to be clear, because that could get a little misconstrued, the athletics is only for the high school as well. Everything's only for the high school.
Correct. No change for the intermediate school, and that is in the letter as well.
Okay. All right. So we're going to move on. Is that conclude your report, Dr. Smikless?
Probably. Yeah. I just want to thank everyone, really. I think everybody through this process has been outstanding, and I can't. I really can't stress enough how hard our folks are working. The teachers are doing an amazing job. So many today. I was struck by Mrs. Kasuba saying how disappointed so many of them were for having to go to all remote because they feel like they're starting to get into a groove with their instruction, and that's such a positive thing. The supervisors, our bus drivers, our custodians, our cafeteria staff. But I also really want to especially thank our principals. They are frontline, doing amazing work, tireless. It's minute after minute after minute. They're just doing amazing work. We're texting each other at midnight sometimes. It's unbelievable. And also our central office, Kelly Weldon, Jen Zona, Ken Janaro, everybody doing just incredible work right now. And all for the purpose of keeping our kids in school and ensuring that they have every opportunity educationally, athletically, artistically that they can have. Nobody wants a return to the spring where so many kids lost so much. And we all want to do the things that we need to do to ensure that we can keep our kids in school.
Very well said. Ms. Gelling, you have something?
Yes. First of all, I agree with what Mrs. Fuller and Mr. Weinstein said about making sure that people who think they might have symptoms will come forward. I know the town appreciates your transparency. You were in the middle of writing one letter to get out when you found out about another case. I would encourage everybody in the community to wait for your communications rather than quickly jump on the internet to get information that isn't always correct and that can be then blown out of proportion. I want to also make sure that we have enough staff in the high school to go remote. So do we have that covered for the next few days?
Yes. Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I hope that we can come together
I mean,
again
I
next Tuesday.
speak to right now and I say yes. I mean, day by day, we never, but we believe so, yes.
But for now, we
Yeah.
do.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have one other question. So a student who is on remote, they are allowed to participate in our after-school activities as well?
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure about that. I thought once a student was remote, they were
No,
remote.
they can take part in athletics, they can take part, even though they're on remote for education, they are allowed to take part in athletics or any of the clubs or activities that we have. One thing I do want to add, and as reminded, so I spoke about athletics, but the extracurricular activity, and I once again said this in my letter, but I want to make sure it's clear, they're not, the extracurricular activity that is in question, where some of the cases have occurred, will need to have an extended period of quarantine. And those individuals will be contacted directly by the school and or the Regional Health Commission. Certainly we'll be letting them know. So just so everybody's clear on that. Mm-hmm. And obviously we don't speak to what that is, out of confidentiality and protection, but obviously they know, because we contact them. But that group will have an extended period of quarantine. And the exact dates of that quarantine will be communicated to them. Okay.
Thank you.
Can
And I would ask when we get to, public comment that, we're trying to keep these students as confidential as possible and the activity as confidential as possible. So I do ask the public, when you speak tonight, if you do by chance know what activity it is or anything that you don't, please don't mention that. Please just leave that part out in your comment so that, as I said, we're really trying everything in our power to keep it as confidential as possible because that's the right thing to do. So, I just wanted to add that. Does that conclude now, Dr. Spanglitz?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to move on. Mr. Janaron, do you have a report this evening?
I think I'll defer mine until after public comment.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So let me just get it on the computer. Hold on a second. Okay, the following are a series of motions to be read by the committee chairpersons. All motions have been discussed at a recent public work session. Some motions have been approved at a public work session, and the minutes of the approved items are posted on the district's website. At this point in the meeting, we will now conduct the first of two public comment sessions. The first session will be open for public comment on agenda items only, and the second session will be at the end of the meeting and can be on any topic. If you have a question, please send it to, or a comment, please send it to Mr. Dietrich. He will call out comments in the order that they were received. And as well, please state your name and town for the record. So at this time, would anyone from the public like to comment on any agenda item at this time? Mr. Dietrich.
Okay, first off, we have Cindy White.
Thank you.
Like over identity.
Thank you.
I have several, so Mr. Dietrich, if you wanted to throw me back into the loop. I don't remember for the life of me last year the ethics meeting being in public session, but I have one question about that, and that is, we talked a lot about the investigation of an ethics complaint, and we talked about the process that it goes through, and then it can be 6 to 8 weeks before something happens. But what is the obligation of the sitting board when there is an ethics complaint against a board member? Does that board member just continue to function through the process until the investigation is completed? Or does that board member have to be suspended in any way?
I don't know. I'll let Kathy or Michael speak to this.
Sure.
Michael.
No problem. Absolutely. No, a complaint, if we're talking about a ethics complaint being filed, then the Board of Education doesn't do anything. depending on who filed the complaint, it's a case between the person that filed the complaint and the single board member, or even multiple board members. But the Board of Education as a body or as an entity don't get involved in those situations because the board itself, the Board of Education, can't take any action. It's only the School Ethics Commission or the Commissioner of Education that can take action against another elected official.
So they would continue functioning remotely?
Yes, it's up to that board member to decide whether they want to continue or not.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michael. The next question I have is, now that we are quickly into a go home remote situation, I think earlier than any of us anticipated, are we going to revisit the fact that we're short-staffed and we're not letting teachers work from home? And now that all of our teachers are working from home, might we allow those teachers to work from home who possibly could be in the classroom environment because of medical needs?
You want me to take that, Amy?
Sure.
Well, one, we're all remote right now for 3 days, so we're hopeful that that will be a very short-term situation. But we are always looking at that situation, Cindy, to see where we are with our subs and where everything is. So that's an ongoing conversation.
Okay, thank you. If you'd like to throw me back in the queue,
Okay, good chat. Thank you.
Okay. Alex Hayes, please.
Sorry, I think I muted myself after that. Let me just pull up my question here. Since we are approving 3 subs tonight, I was just wondering, Dr. Stefankiewicz, if you can go over the status of our sub pool and if we have received any subs, being sent our way from those 2 staffing agencies that we decided on to use last week.
Yeah. To my knowledge, at this time, we have not been. There was no availability from those agencies to provide us any subs, at least in the teaching ranks. They have people in other areas, counseling, occupational therapy, places like that we don't necessarily need those individuals. But it's my understanding that at this point we have not received anyone from those agencies that we've approved. The status is pretty much status quo where we've been, but on any given day, depending on depending on the amount of absences that may exist on any given day for whatever reason it may be, that could put things in a little bit of a state of flux. If we don't have a lot of, there's the people that we have on leaves that we know of, and then every day somebody could call out for, they're not feeling well. And right now, we're particularly telling people, hey, if you're not feeling that great, and normally in years past you might have had a little cold and you're come to work, we don't want you to do that right now. So, we're going to have situations where some people are just going to be out on a daily basis, and if that's the case, then we may have situations where we may have to do what we would call double coverages, and maybe put kids in a larger space and have it be covered. We've had that situation this week at the high school. The bigger issues are more so at the secondary level than at the elementary level. But but it's a daily chess match, no doubt about it, to determine who's going to be out and how we can fill that position with the best qualified person.
Okay. I have a second question, and then I can go back into the queue if you don't mind. I heard from, I got a text from 2 high school parents tonight who had not received your letter, Dr. Stefankiewicz, about the school closing and, the positive COVID tests. Will there be some kind of a robocall?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Alex, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yes, tomorrow we will, tomorrow was a remote day anyway. So, that was going to be the case, and everybody should have known that. But tomorrow we have already worked a line up that we will be doing a call just as a reminder and to ensure that everybody receives that, yes.
Okay, I know you're wearing a mask. It's really hard to hear you.
I'm sorry. Yes, we will be doing that tomorrow, yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have more questions. I'll ask later.
Okay, next up is Susan Green.
Good evening, everybody. My question relates, Jim, to Susan Green, 21 Cambridge Way, Bayside. The question relates to the COVID numbers and the positivity rates in the community and how that was translated during your interactions with the Board of Health. So in other words, I'm just taking data from the Monmouth County website. In the last 2 weeks, we've had a 12% increase in the numbers of positive cases.
Mm-hmm.
Now, somebody's positive doesn't mean that they're, ill or whatever. But how does the amount of community cases factor into the decision whether or not to close the schools or not? Is there a formula? Is there a threshold? Is there a discussion? Is there a protocol in place?
Yeah. Susan, on that, I honestly, that's probably more of a question for the Health Commission. I don't have an exact answer on that. Even though I will say, in the Department of Health guidelines put out for schools, they do have one scenario where a larger community spread is potentially a factor in determining what you want to do with schools. I will say that the Department of Health did put out and they do it weekly now. It's a weekly sort of COVID update of activity based on COVID. They do it for flu every year, and now they're doing it for COVID. It comes out every Friday. It's usually a week behind. But it basically tells you, it breaks the state up into regions, and Monmouth is part of the Central East region, which is Monmouth, Ocean, Union, and Middlesex counties. And it gives it a green, yellow, orange, red, green being the best, red being the worst. And as of this past Friday, the Monmouth and Ocean counties were in the green, meaning, full speed ahead. However, I think it's also been very public in the last couple of days, especially, that Monmouth and Ocean counties right now seem to be leading the way, particularly Ocean County, but Monmouth coming in second in new cases. So that is something that we are absolutely watching and cognizant of. And I haven't gotten the town's latest numbers yet compared to last week, but we absolutely take a look at that. And I think, I can't speak for the Health Commission, but I think the matrix that they put out on weekly, the weekly cases is a big barometer of what they use.
Well, just from the website, I backed it up from September 8th. It was 449, and today it was 506. So that's a 12% difference.
Oh, you mean the total number of cases?
Yeah, total.
You mean in the township?
Yeah.
Right. Now, one thing just to let you know, not all of those are Ocean, and that's something that Office of Emergency Management.
Is that Deal or Interlake, and they break it out by town.
Right, but in some cases they do it by zip code. Just so you know, they do it by zip code, and in some cases 07712 is also some areas of Asbury Park. So there could be it's usually a little bit lower than what they report on the Monmouth County website, and that's per the Office of Emergency Management here in Ocean. That's something we talk about in our task force meetings every week.
Okay.
I mean, it's not much lower. It's probably 20, maybe 20 or 25 lower, but it's usually lower than what's on that website.
All right. My second question is about re-entry of the students who are quarantined.
Mm-hmm.
Are we requiring a test for re-entry or not? I mean, honestly, I have no personal thoughts about that.
Yeah.
But is that a requirement, or
it doesn't require a test. We do look for medical clearance, however.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. As we require for any students who's out for an extended period of time. So, we make sure a doctor signing off that a student is able to return. And there is, and any student who's positive, there is a criteria. It's usually 10 days from the time that they have been found to be positive. And then beyond that, it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's 24 hours symptom-free beyond the 10 days without any aid of medication. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's in that range.
Who's next, Jim?
Next up is Sandy Abdulaziz.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so first of all, I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Janice Fuller said earlier about, people, I think you said it, about people, being mindful of what's said on social media, because I know for a fact that a family knows which person this is and was very nasty on social media about it, and I think that, Pam Gutman and I run that one site. It was not on our site, it was on a different site, but Pam Gutman and I run that one site, and people are coming to us like it was blown up today, and we removed any comments that were not kind, respectful. Nobody mentioned any names, thankfully. One of the moms did come forward, though, but I just want to say that a lot of this also is coming from the kids right at the school, because I can't tell you, the kids walk out of school and immediately start talking about who's out, who's tested, like they all just know. And so that's where a lot of it's coming from, and they go home to their parents, and that's how the rumors are growing astronomically, I'll say, because the kids are just, coming out left and right with stories, and some of it's true, some of it's not, but I think, my comment and Pam's comment to everyone is, I said today, I'm positive we will hear before this Board of Ed meeting and or hear at the Board of Ed meeting what the true story is, and that's exactly what happened. So I just wanted to reiterate that to you guys, but I think it needs to be said that, people need to be mindful that, even on our site, we said the parents, some of the parents are on that site, like they're reading these comments. You have to be respectful, and it could be you tomorrow, you don't know, so we have to be respectful to that. So I just wanted to put that out there. Also, someone asked me to ask, an anonymous person, obviously. I'm sorry, I didn't start with Sandy Abdulaziz, Ferry Dune Road, Wayside. Anyway, somebody asked me to ask the activity in question. I have to word this correctly, Dr. Stankiewicz. The activity in question that one of the positive cases came from. I was told to ask, why wasn't the entire team/group quarantined? And now is the entire team/group/coach going to be quarantined?
I'm going to speak generally, Sandy. I'm not going to speak, about a particular coach or particular students or things like that, because they're potential, identifiers. I'll just speak in general terms. So when we work with the Monmouth County Regional Health Commission on contact tracing, they look for who may have had a close contact, and a close contact is defined as within 6 feet for 10 minutes or more. So if a student was within that and deemed to have had a close contact, then they are often recommended by the commission for quarantine. If they did not have that close contact, and I want to tell you that it is a 0 degree. I'm going to borrow Mrs. Kasuba's line here. It's a 0 degree of separation. So in other words, just purely hypothetical here, Sandy. Say you're positive, and you and I had a close contact. I was within 6 feet of you for more than 10 minutes. I would be considered a close contact, and it would be recommended that I quarantine. However, if Mr. Janarone then was, perhaps near me or in the room, but not a close contact, he may not have to quarantine because he wasn't a close contact to you, who was the positive. If he was later close contact to me and I'm not positive, he still falls under someone who would not have to quarantine because I'm not a positive at that time. Now, if I were to become positive, we would contract trace back, and if it's typically it's within 48 hours of when symptoms appear or there's a positive test result, they go back 48 hours. And so if they're looking at a close contact within that time, those are the folks who would need to quarantine. But once again, let me state that we do not decide. We as a school district really don't decide who should be quarantined. That quarantine needs to come at the recommendation of a medical professional, and those are the folks at Regional Health Commission, or a doctor of a person individually might say, so and so has a positive test and they need to be quarantined or what have you. So that's how that works. And so for example, you could have a classroom situation that is appropriately socially distanced, where you could have a student who is sitting in the back of the room and people in the front of the room may not need to quarantine, depending on if everybody was masked, if there was like appropriate social distance. So that's how it works. And I know that that seems a little odd sometimes when you hear that, but it's not an automatic that, for example, one child in a classroom would then have to quarantine that entire classroom. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that, I know you said Tuesday is a fluid date at this point. I mean, hopefully that's what we're hoping for, and I just hope that, if there was any more positives coming, that, we would have them before then, and we wouldn't get started and then have to stop again.
Yeah, that's the goal. The average amount of time that it takes usually for symptoms is about 5 days for the majority of people. 98% of people have symptoms before 11 days. So, a lot of that contact by next Tuesday, we'll be pretty far along in this process. So, if symptoms are going to appear and positives are going to appear, we feel confident that they're going to appear by next week.
Okay. Can I just ask one further, just follow on to this? If somebody's in an activity that, just any one of our club sports, anything that's meeting in person, if somebody's in that and someone in that gets tested positive, does everyone in that group get told about it, or only the ones that are being told to quarantine?
More than likely, everyone in that group would be contacted to determine if they were a close contact.
Okay.
And because it really is, a fairly, it can be a lengthy process. I mentioned today that we heard about a third case this morning, and we were not really able to know all of the information and everything we needed to know until, later in the afternoon. Believe me, I would have loved to have gotten my letter out to the community far before 6 o'clock, but we were literally hanging up with the Health Commission at 5 o'clock today. So sometimes that process takes long because they go through every scenario. And also what's taking a little bit longer right now is that uptick in cases in Monmouth County that we're seeing. So I definitely heard from the Health Commission over the last couple of days that they're a little busier right now than they were a couple of weeks ago. And a lot of that may have to do with post-Labor Day and we could be seeing a lot of the Labor Day, situation right now. Get-togethers and things like that, kids going back to college, what have you. So that's something that we all have to be very mindful of, particularly in Monmouth and Ocean County, which is interesting because, the southern shore points are not seeing the same uptick, so we have to be very mindful here in our counties.
Okay, so just to clarify, because I have a lot of parents, there's rumors about, where this third person came from and all that. Just to clarify, if that third person is in an activity at the school, then those people in that activity know about it already, or know that someone in their activity has tested positive, correct?
Once again, I can't speak to if the Monmouth Regional Health Commission has gotten to everyone, but if they don't know about it, if there's a need for them to know, if they don't know about it now, they should know about it pretty soon.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sandy. Next up, Mr. Dietrich.
Back to Cindy White.
Okay. Do you still live in Oakhurst? I'm sorry? Do you still live in Oakhurst?
I still have special ed buses. It is my understanding that we have not been able to appropriately social distance on the buses. I'm demanding for a confirmation or denial, and if it is confirmed, have we notified the parents that the children are not being properly
I couldn't hear, I apologize, I couldn't hear your audio very well, Cindy. You're saying about social distancing on buses, is that what you're asking?
On special education buses.
On special education buses specifically?
Yes.
I haven't been made aware of an issue, and there are aides on
I
those
think
buses.
Yeah,
right?
I think she's talking about the number of kids on the
Is
smaller.
it the number of kids or how they're acting on the bus, you mean?
The number.
of kids.
They're acting perfectly.
Okay, I didn't know if you meant they were getting up and like sitting where, you know what I mean, just sharing seats when they weren't supposed to or something like that. Yeah, I don't mean acting inappropriately, I mean just not necessarily, you know. Right.
There's too many children on
we'll
the
start a
side
fight.
of the bus and be appropriately subsidized.
Okay, Ken, do you want to,
Sure. Now, just, remember that they're according to the guidelines, as long as they have a mask, we can run buses at 54 passenger. We can have, loaded buses. Now, of course, we have strived to decrease those numbers, which went hand in hand with the hybrid model. And of course, it's more difficult on the smaller vans. Number one, because the bus is smaller, and number two, many of those students are going 4 days a week and aren't, halved, or because of the hybrid model where some students are coming in 2 days, and then the other half of the students are coming in for the other 2 days. They're all at the same time. So we have tried to move buses where we can. We're actually anticipating the buses we ordered back in April to come in by the end of the month, and we're hoping that will enable us to move some buses around to try to make them to have a larger bus with the number of students on the bus. So it's not a requirement, but we're trying to do what we can, but unfortunately, that's the best we can do right now.
also, and this may be impacting on which just started today, I'm pleased to say that just today we were able to bring more of our special education students back to a 4-day-a-week schedule. Some of our students who receive, it's about 24 students who receive specialized reading instruction. We were able to bring back into the district 4 days a week, and we were able to do that quicker than we anticipated being able to do that. But the numbers supported it, and the fact that we're only talking about a couple dozen kids enabled us to do it. And that's primarily at the elementary level. So we're pleased about that. It's funny because as a task force member, Cindy, that you are, and we appreciate your service to our task force. We spent last week talking a lot about how we can start to get our kids in more, right? Not how we can go on all remote, and we're still committed to that. We're still committed, particularly our young. I mean, all of our students, but particularly our youngest students, and our students who are most vulnerable, our special ed students, our ELL students. We are still hopeful that we can follow a timeline to get these students in more days per week, because we know that many of these students are struggling with the days that they're on remote learning. So that is still a goal, even though we've had certainly a little bit of a setback here at the high school. We hope that that's not going to be a long-term setback, and we can still move in those directions to get more and more of our kids back to school.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I do, I've been advocating for weeks about our exceptional learners getting back to the classroom, where the parents go back to my original question. Are the parents being made aware that their children are not being properly social distanced on these buses? Or are they just putting their kids on the bus thinking that we're following our own guidelines and putting their kids at risk?
I couldn't hear what you
I think
said.
the parents being made aware that the students are not being socially distanced on the buses. I mean, I don't.
Informing the parents that if I'm the first bus stop and I set my child on the bus, I don't know that you're filling that bus up. And according to our own guidelines, it says that we will be appropriately social distancing every other row on a bus.
No, and it says where possible. It absolutely does not say that that's a mandate. Yeah,
And that's semantics. And why do those rules not apply to special education?
They apply to everyone where we're doing it as best we can. So, and we are doing it as best we can. The situation there is that those students are in longer, more days, so it's more difficult to accomplish that. So that's
right. So we're leaving them at higher risk. That's the reality. We're accepting the fact that we're leaving them at higher risk because they have a greater need, and that is an inequity.
no, and we're not accepting anything. We do not have additional buses to allocate to that, and actually we have ordered them, and when they come in at the end of September, that we will have additional buses, and that's when we plan to do as much as we possibly can.
I'm just asking that we give the parents the courtesy to say, you know what, I'll drive Johnny to school if you don't have enough room on the bus for him to be socially.
And actually, if they're the first person on the bus going in, or they would be the last person on the bus coming home, so they would see.
Other one.
Well, it would be.
Maybe if there's so few of them.
It's opposite. It flips. It usually flips.
Okay.
It does flip.
That's an option.
Okay.
And my last question for now is if parents in the high school decide that they want to keep their kids virtual for the full incubation period as documented, if they say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable with them going back for 10 days, are they going to be penalized, or will those kids be allowed to go remote for those 10 days?
I think any individuals like that need to just contact their principal, and we would try to work with them. I mean, we've already said that if there's ever a situation where students who are on hybrid, we kind of spoke to this earlier, that maybe this causes a problem because where a student may have a little sniffle in the past and they'd come to school and now they're not, and maybe there's conjecture now why that student's not in school, which shouldn't be happening. I'm sorry to hear that that's happening, but obviously any student, if you're home and you're able to access remote learning, then we want you to access remote learning. So if a student is not comfortable and is not going to be coming, but ultimately wants to remain in the hybrid model beyond, a couple weeks from now, I think they just need to communicate that with their teachers and with their principal, their guidance counselor, and we would work to accommodate them.
And I think that's an important message to get out there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Allison Oskin.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. Allison Oscon, High Ridge Road, Wayside. Apologies if this has already been discussed. I'm just wondering if there is a symptom list or any clear-cut, written-down guidelines as to, if your child is exhibiting this symptom or that symptom that you are mandated to keep them home. I tried looking at all the reopening documents. I couldn't find anything specifically written down.
The two correspondents that I sent home at the end of August and again at the very beginning of September before school started contained our health screening form. If you go to our website under where it says Restart and Recovery, or not Restart Recovery, Restart Plan, there's a link there that says Daily Screening Form. And it'll be right there. And there's a column A, column B checklist for you to look at.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. If you have enough trouble finding that, just email me tomorrow, and I'd be happy to direct you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mr. Teacher?
Next up is Pam Gutman.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I live at 14 Brandywine Road in Wayside. I have 3 questions. I know I missed this one and I apologize, it was cut out. Are we having students that are quarantined test before they come back to school?
It is not a requirement, Pam. We do require medical documentation that the student is okay to return.
So I guess, which leads to, so the CDC changed the guidelines for that on Friday, this past Friday, and now they are suggesting that if you quarantine, that you get tested. So can we look into that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that we can require, really. I mean, I guess from a medical, as far as getting tested, we strongly encourage it. I mean, we'll talk to our school physicians, and I'll check with the health folks. But up to this point, everything we've been told is that you do not, because for example, if a student is placed on quarantine, a negative test result cannot excuse them from a quarantine. So they still have to do the quarantine period. So right. So if a student is in quarantine and they never tested positive, then they really don't need a positive test to return. If they were a positive case, right now we are asking for medical clearance from their doctor that they are safe to return.
Right, but you don't have to have a negative test because it could take a while for a negative test after.
Right. I mean, it could take another 3 to 4 or 5 days and even longer to get that test result. And if the student is able to return from school to school, then they should be able to.
Right. Okay. My second question is, I'm confused. So we're going back to school for the high school on Tuesday, but yet sports can resume on Saturday?
Yeah, because that's just the next school day. It really goes through Friday. I mean, that's really what the all remote and the hiatus of athletics. It goes through Friday. The only reason that there's a difference between them is we just have off Monday and it's a weekend, and athletics does practice on the weekends. So there was no reason that we couldn't start athletics on Saturday. If the kids would like to come to school on Saturday, we can try that.
No, I don't think they want to come.
I didn't think so either.
I'm more concerned about, so if parents aren't comfortable on Saturday sending their kids back to athletics, will that be excused from the coaches?
I think they should just communicate with their coaches. I'm sure that we can be, as flexible as possible with them. I think you should just communicate with the coaches and Mr. Todd. I think, we've stressed flexibility and patience throughout this entire process, and I think that still holds true.
Okay, and my final question is, so there's been a lot of controversy on the CDC website as of late with whether or not COVID-19 can be passed through droplets, not just through close contact. So I guess my question is there any way that we can be notified of positive cases in our kids' classes so that we can make decisions for our children that we feel are appropriate? In other words, you were talking before about how if you're not, quote, a close contact within 6 feet for 10 minutes or more, you don't have to quarantine. But I kind of feel like with all the controversy with the droplets, that it's really a parent's decision as to whether they're comfortable with that idea, and we should be able to make that decision for our children, because I really do think it's a droplet thing, especially from what I see in the hospitals, and I think there's a lot of politics going on with the CDC website, so I don't know that you can trust that.
Well,
so I feel like we maybe need some choices.
So what we do is that's what we really work with the guidance through the Regional Health Commission, and we speak to them. I mean, I would say that if a student in a class is a positive, that there's a likelihood that at least there would be a contact to speak to a contact tracing, to engage in some form of contact tracing. But we would work to follow the CDC guidelines on that. Excuse me, not the CDC guidelines, the Regional Health Commission, recommendations on that. We're not the health professionals, so we rely on them and we work with them, and also, obviously if there's question, we would speak to our school physician. Our nurses have been incredible through this; they're incredibly knowledgeable. So we would work with our health professionals to make the notifications and contacts that need to be made.
So we're back to if you're in the back of the room and you're not within 6 feet and about 10 minutes or more, then you're not going to notify us.
No, that's not what I said. What I said was more than...
I'm just confused. I'm trying to
Right.
understand.
There's a difference between being notified that you may need to... You could be notified to be questioned as to what kind of contact you may have had with the student. However, you may find that if the contact was not considered a close contact, that you may not have to quarantine. I will say, if there's a possibility that we have a classroom type situation, then there's probably a likelihood that and if you look right in the Department of Health guidelines, it actually says that there's not a requirement that everyone in a class might have to quarantine. Right in that NJDOH document, which is actually on our website as well, where the daily health screening is. But a lot might depend on the size of that class, how many kids were in the class at the time. So I think the likelihood of some form of notification is certainly probable, but it doesn't mean that you would necessarily have to quarantine.
Right, but at that point, if you don't have to quarantine, it would be a parent's choice whether or not they felt comfortable.
Well, as I said, if you're in school and you decide for whatever reason that for the next couple of for the next week or so that you want to, or 2 weeks, whatever it may be, that you don't want to come to school because of whatever reason, and you'd like to avail yourself of the remote option for that short period of time, you're a typical hybrid student, but because if your child was in a classroom where there was a positive case, but it was determined that you're not a close contact and you don't have to quarantine, I don't think anybody's going to argue with you if you decide you want to keep your child home and make that decision on your own.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Mr. Dietrich?
Okay, Alex Hayes.
Okay.
Hi, and sorry, Alex Hayes, Oakhurst, Dow Avenue, I forgot to say that earlier. I'm having a really hard time hearing and understanding Dr. Stefankiewicz, so I don't know if he said some of this in the last few minutes. It's very muffled, and I know that's not his fault, but so that might predicate some of what I'm asking. Just wondering, what about the siblings of those positive cases? Will parents of students in any siblings classes be notified? And this kind of goes along with Ken's question as well. I'm not asking, are they quarantining? Because it seems that that answer is no. But will they be notified? And along the same line of siblings, are teachers in any of the classes that possible siblings might be in, are they being notified as well? And or asked to quarantine if they want to, or mandated to quarantine?
So as I discussed earlier, the situation is a 0 degree of separation. So the only notifications that exist would be any contact with a positive case. So if there's a sibling that is not a positive case, then obviously if that sibling is living in the household of a person who is a positive case, that person would have to quarantine. But if the sibling, him or herself, is not a positive case, then there is no notification or contact tracing for that sibling, unless, of course, they become positive. If they become positive, then the contact tracing would go back to within 48 hours of when that child becomes either symptomatic or is determined to be positive if they're tested and are asymptomatic.
Okay, so along those lines then, and did you answer this? I'm sorry. Assuming that that third case was actually in school on Thursday from your letter saying that they didn't start quarantining until Friday, everyone in that student's classes notified, because one would presume they were within 6 feet, or what is it, 10 feet within, would you say, a couple of minutes?
6 feet, 10 minutes.
Okay, so were all this in that student's classes and all those teachers notified?
I don't, that's something that, the school nurse would work with the Regional Health Commission on, so I don't know the exact status of that right now, but that's something that they would go through and discuss, what classes or, what was the situation, and anyone who would need to be notified would need to be notified. I can't say that that's all been completed at this point.
Okay, those were kind of all my one question. Can I ask my second question? Dr. Steinberg, a parent last week mentioned she was a little concerned about, the sudden departure from having been promised bus aids to then no bus aids, and she was a little concerned that parents aren't being sufficiently, relayed that information. So then after last week started, a lot of parents were saying, I had no idea there weren't going to be bus aids, and they were disappointed about putting their kids on the buses, having not known that. So have you received any complaints from parents who didn't know that there weren't going to be any buses? And then have we seen a departure of kids as busers? Like are there suddenly less kids on buses now because, parents might have had that as their, I will send my kid on a bus if there's a bus aid.
Right. I received one phone call from a parent over the last couple of weeks about that. And so after I had the conversation, they understood and seemed to be fine. I went back and read my letter from, I'm trying to remember if it was my letter on the 11th or there's been so many letters lately, but I went back and really looked at the language and under the daily health screenings where, I felt it seemed to say pretty clearly that the buses, that aids will not be on all the buses. So, but obviously not everybody, I understand that not everybody reads necessarily every word of every letter, but to answer your question, I received one phone call.
And are we seeing a drop though of?
Oh, that I don't know.
To my knowledge, we're seeing an increase.
An increase of people using the buses?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Dietrich, anybody else?
No.
Okay. All right, we'll move into our agenda at this time. Sorry. Approval of minutes, Dr. Marshall.
Thank you, Ms. McGovern. I move to approve the meeting minutes in accordance with the Board of Education bylaws, reporting of board meetings for the work meeting and executive session minutes of September 15th, 2020. I have a second, please?
Second.
Second.
Any comments or corrections, questions regarding the September 15th work or executive session minutes? Seeing none, Ken?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
All right, moving on to approval of bills, Mrs. Fuller.
Thank you. I move for the approval of the following paid items as detailed below, totaling $6,822,400.93. I have a second.
Second.
Mr. General.
Okay, roll call. Mr. Dietrich?
Yes.
Mrs. Fuller?
Yes.
Mrs. Gilman?
Yes.
Mr. Haddon?
Yes.
Dr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. Tallarico?
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein?
Yes.
And Ms. McGovern?
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries.
Thank you, Mrs. Fuller. Financial Management and Resource Services, Mrs. Gilman.
Yes, Mrs. McGovern, we have 7 items for this evening in financial management. 7.1, acceptance and certification of monthly financial reports. The following resolution certifies that budget balances at the end of August 2020 were adequate to pay all remaining obligations of the 2020-2021 school year, and that account groupings required by the state have adequate balances. The board is also certifying that the independent reports of the treasurer and the business office are in agreement. as listed below. 7.2 transfers. The following motion is to transfer monies from one account in the budget to another and provide the adequate balance as referred to in the first motion. Move for approval, hold it, of the attached resolution dated August 2020 covering appropriation transfers in the 2020-2021 General Fund 10. Said transfers shall result in no change in the total original appropriations. 7.3, use of facilities. Move to approve the use of facilities as per the attached memo dated September 22nd, 2020. 7.4, contract agreement with Monmouth County Vocational School District. Move to approve the agreement with Monmouth County Vocational School District to accept Township of Ocean students into the following programs for the 2020-2021 school year as listed below. 7.5, the ESEA grant. Move to approve the following personnel salary percentages to be charged off to the ESEA grant application for the 2020-2021 school year as per the attached. 7.6, educational software gift cards. Move to accept the donation of educational software gift cards in the total amount of $2,500 for the MD teachers and related services provided from Mr. Fran Hines of the Colton and Friends Foundation. 7.7, discussion of use of facilities. The Board of Education and Administration will discuss inside use of facility applications. Thank you. Mr. General, you want to comment on?
Yeah, you know what, maybe a second and then I can, is there a second?
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Dietrich? Okay, 1 through 6 or 5. 1 through 5, I believe, have been discussed at a prior, workshop meeting. So unless anyone has any questions about that, I'll just skip to 7.5, I believe, was new. So the ESEA grant, this is an annual salaries where we approve the salaries that are funded through that grant. So that's something that's just a yearly approval of those salaries. And then 7.6 is something Mrs. Zona brought, which is great, a great thing for anytime donations, especially for for any students is a good thing. So we look forward to that. And then the last thing, 7.7, is we've had this discussion the last periodically, and I just wanted to have it again regarding, and it's really the inside use of facilities, in which to this point in the school year we have not opened up for groups, outside groups, to utilize the indoor facilities for obvious reasons. And I'm just looking, because many groups come and they're not looking to use the facility the next day, they may be looking to use it the next month or longer, because some of them may have, for instance, a Taekwondo tournament or a college prep class that they may want to promote that in the use of that facility. So I'm just hoping to get a little direction, and we can discuss it now, we can discuss it next workshop meeting also, but I just wanted to see regarding that, if going into October, if that's something that we're confident, which I would recommend into the month of October, of not bringing in outside groups yet until we really get a good handle on the cleaning and everything that's going on in our schools before we introduce outside people to the schools in the current situation. So I would
say that with our current status of having to close down our school, that until we're open on a full basis where we feel comfortable that we're not going to close, that personally I would wait till that happens before we understand having outside groups come in.
So could I get just a consensus, I guess, for the month of October? So this way, when people look to apply to utilize our buildings, I can say that we're close to until end of October, and we'll be reevaluating it in another couple of weeks. Of course, we'll have to reevaluate before the end of October, so that for the month of November. Is there any issues with anyone on the board?
So if somebody wants to book for January, we're going to tell them no, or we're going to tell them yes with the proviso the board has to feel comfortable letting people in.
I would tell them that January has not been decided as of yet. As of right now, we're closed until October, end of October, and past October will be decided probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks. By mid-October, we'll be deciding the future. So I would wait till probably our October 13th meeting and put this back on the agenda for discussion. We can discuss it October 6th or earlier if you'd like. If things change, one way or the other, things could change.
Well, we can always, if things start changing, we can always bring it up in old business. One of us can bring it up if we don't have it on the agenda anyway. So I think that putting it on for the October 13th meeting is probably fine to do, personally.
And Ken, when it comes time to be, we could revisit adding in additional cleaning fees as necessary, waivers that we want signed for liability.
Yes, we've discussed. We did institute during the summer for the outside.
Right.
We instituted an additional waiver for them, but when we had discussed additional cleaning fees, right now we don't have that because we're only doing outside. So there's right.
Fee schedule to
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. As you know, it's board policy, so I could bring the policy back when we're ready, and we could add that. There's some latitude in the policy. I think the superintendent has the latitude to make some exceptions, or the board has the latitude to make some exceptions. So I don't know that we'd have to change.
We love talking about that policy, Ken. So.
Yeah, it's definitely a frequent flyer policy. So it's always fine to review again. So that sounds good. For October 13th, I'll put it on the agenda and we can review it then. Okay.
Thank you.
So we need to vote on.
Yeah, so were there any other questions on any other items before the vote? Okay, hearing none. Okay, so these are items 1 through 6. Mr. Dietrich?
Yes.
Mrs. Fuller?
Yes.
Mrs. Gilman?
Yes.
Mr. Haddon?
Yes.
Dr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. Tallarico?
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein?
Yes.
And Ms. McGovern?
Yeah.
Okay, the motion's carried.
Thank you, Ms. Gilman. Dr. Marshall, Instruction, Education, and Student Activities.
Thank you, Ms. McGovern. I have 3 motions this evening for consideration. Item number 1, I move to approve a student from Monmouth University who fulfilled his early field practice hours in accordance with the attached memo dated September 17th. Item 2, I move to approve the attached memos dated September 17th regarding staff professional development activities. And finally, item 3, I move to approve the New Jersey Department of Education school self-assessment for determining HIP grades under the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights Act for the period of July 1, 2019 to June 30th, 2020. Copies of those, all 5 reports attached. Can I have a second, please, on 1 through 3?
I'll second.
These have all, I believe, been discussed, so Ken?
Okay, Mr. Dietrich?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller?
Yes.
Mrs. Gilman?
Yes.
Mr. Haddon?
Yes.
Dr. Marshall?
Yes to items 2 and 3, and I recuse myself from item number 1 regarding Monmouth University.
Ms. Tallarico?
Yes.
And Mr. Weinstein?
I'll say yes to points 2 and 3, and I'll recuse myself from point 1.
Okay, Mrs. McGovern?
Yes.
Okay, the motions 2 and 3 carry unanimously, and 1 is 602.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Marshall. Personnel, Mrs. Fuller.
Thank you. I move for the approval of items 9.1 through 9.8. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Chandler?
Mr. Dietrich?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller?
Yes.
Mrs. Gilman?
Yes.
Mr. Haddon?
Yes.
Dr. Marshall?
Yes.
Ms. Tallarico?
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein?
Yes.
And Ms. McGovern?
Yes.
Okay, the motion is carried.
Thank you, Mrs. Fuller. Public Relations, Mr. Dietrich.
Thank you, Madam President. I have 2 items for review this evening. First is the sponsorship program. Move to approve the 2020-2021 sponsorship program participants in accordance with Board Policy 9720 as follows. And 10.2, professional development activities. Move to approve in accordance with District Policy 6471 that board members attend the NJSBA virtual workshops October 20th through October 22nd, 2020. The group rate is $900 for the Board of Education and Administration up to 25 people. Following board members shall attend virtually. Any discussion on either item?
Could I just add that I did add everyone's name there, and you can, and maybe Kathy can speak to this, but I believe you can, even if you can't attend virtually those days, the sessions will be recorded, so you can look and hear them at another time. Is that right, Kathy? If she's still with us.
Still here.
You're on mute, Kathy.
Okay, I'm trying to get unmuted.
You're good.
And my computer is not cooperating. Yes, that is true. As long as the board has paid the registration, all of the programs will be recorded and you will have access to them for the entire year.
Oh, that's awesome.
And can I ask you, now that it's virtual, do we still have to, does the board still have to recuse themselves from voting on their own name?
I would, just to play it safe, but maybe that's a question for Michael.
I'm a true believer in playing it safe.
Okay.
So can you go over, Ken, how to vote? Because some people might have forgotten from last year. It's my favorite vote of the entire year.
Yes, I believe you can vote in the affirmative except for yourself, I believe would be right, Jim? I know you always have that down pat.
Yes, everything except to where I have a conflict.
Okay.
That's in language.
All right. Okay, so are we
playing it safe?
Excellent. So can I have a second, please?
Second.
Okay. Mrs. Gilman. Okay, Mr. Dietrich, number 1 and 2.
Yes to both, except where I'm listed in 10.2.
Okay, Mrs. Fuller.
Yes to both except for where I'm listed in 10.2.
Mrs. Gilman.
Yes.
Mr. Haddon.
Yes to both, except I'm going to abstain all over myself.
Dr. Marshall.
Yes to both, except 10.2 as it pertains to myself.
Mr. Tallarico.
That's how I should have phrased it.
To both, accepting 10.2 where it
Mr. Weinstein.
Yes to both, except for 10.2 where it mentions myself.
And Mr. McGovern.
Yes to both, except in 10.2 where I have a conflict.
Okay, well, both
agrees all around.
Yep, so both motions carry somehow.
Okay. Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Dietrich. Going on to technology, Mr. Weinstein.
Thank you, Ms. McGovern. Move to approve the COVID-19 technology funds for non-public school services agreement between Township of Ocean Board of Education, TOBOE, and Monmouth Ocean Education Services, MOESC. TOBOE agrees to pay MOESC an administration fee of 5% of the fund allocations for the COVID-19 technology funds for non-public schools through June 30th, 2021, in accordance with the attached agreement. So Ken, you probably have to explain what this is about.
Yeah, this is like many of our non-public monies. Most of them are defined, non-public schools that are defined geographically within Ocean Township. So then we act as a flow-through for the state of these funds. And we have the responsibility of administering the funds. So that's, this was I attached all the guidance. This was a late breaking approval from the state that came down. So I wanted to get it on. I know it was a late add to the meeting, so I apologize for that. But this is something with a short time frame, and if you looked at the guidance from the state, then that's something that came down on us to distribute to the non-public schools.
Okay. So can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Dietrich.
Yes.
Mrs. Fuller?
Yes.
Mrs. Gilman?
Yes.
Mr. Haddon?
Yes.
Dr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Tallarico?
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein?
Yes.
And Ms. McGovern?
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Weinstein. And thank you again to Mike Gross and Kathy Weinhoff for hanging on so long. We're going to go back to Kathy. I just do want to say that I know this has been long and that some of the presentations have been long. We've always done ethics training in a public section. It's just that we've never had any public that's come to it. So, you know, this was the date that worked for all of us to get together. And so thank you again for holding on with us and for breaking it up in two parts so we could get our, you know, the bulk of our meeting accomplished. So we will have public comment at the end, but for now we'll go back to old business later, but we're going to go back to Ms. Weinhoff to discuss our board goals.
Okay, so we're going to just briefly discuss the board self-evaluation. I had sent it out to Ken, and I asked him to send it on to the board members. I can bring it up and share it if you want me to, or...
We did, Ken did send it out, so everybody has it, you know, should have had time to look at it.
Okay, great. So I just think just to let the public know that the board participated in an annual self-evaluation. It's not something that's required by the board to do. It is a best practice. And really what it does is it is for the board to go back and reflect over the work that they've done over the past year, to evaluate themselves as a board as a whole and as individual board members. And the evaluation covers 9 different areas. Touches on planning, touches policy, student achievement, finance, board operations, board performance, board superintendent relations, board staff relations, and board engagement. And just for the board members to know, when I go through and I look at the scores of the evaluation, I really like to see those scores be 3 and above. And we're looking at the overall average, and there will be some indicators within the areas where you may fall below the 3.0. However, it's few and far between. And I will tell you, when I went through the evaluation, I mean, I considered it to be a very good evaluation of yourselves. There were a couple areas where the scores had gone down to 2.9, but that's not enough for me to be alarmed and say, hey board, what is going on in these particular areas? But the biggest thing about the evaluation is to focus on the last 2 questions that are there, where we talk about and we ask you to put down your 3 major challenges that are facing the district. And that becomes some areas that the district may want to look at as far as incorporating those into your district goals. So when I went through them, I mean, there's not anything that's in those challenges that you're not currently working on. Because a lot of it was, you know, many board members mentioned the remote and hybrid learning and making sure, you know, with the social emotional learning and making sure that the kids, as they're coming back into school, that those social emotional needs are being met. The other thing, was here talked a little bit about, a couple people mentioned your changing demographics. And so those are things that, you can reflect on, but as I thought about it, those are things that are already captured within your strategic plan. And then the second question is asking what you as board members really feel that you need to work on in the upcoming year. And for the community members that are here, you just approved, to attend the annual workshop virtually. And I think it's important for your community to know that that is the board's opportunity for professional development. So it's important for your staff members and for your administrators to have ongoing professional development. It's also important to you as board members that you have that professional development also. But in looking at some of the things that you mentioned here, several board members brought up ethics. Well, we had ethics training tonight. So, hopefully the information that was contained within that training, you can go back, you can reflect on, look at, the PDF that I'm gonna send you with the PowerPoint, just to make sure that we stay within, I like to say, that we stay within our lane as a board member and not venture over into the realm of administering to the schools. But I mean, some of the other things that were mentioned here was, to have a more consistent discussion or on the update on the progress towards the achievement of the district goals. So, those are things I think that the board can work on over the year. And of course, communication showed up. And I mean, it was communication between board members, communication between the board and the administration, the superintendent and the board and the community. So, I mean, I didn't find anything surprising here, so I don't know if there was anything within the evaluation that you as board members saw that you wanted to discuss or ask any questions about.
I do think that a lot of it, like you said, that came out of it, like the communication or the strategic plan, that a lot of those things were goals last year. And, in essence, when the year gets cut the way it did, some of those things are obviously going to carry over, because I think that the board feels that there's still room for improvement in a lot of those. So I really think that a lot of it wasn't, surprising. And, but I did think it was a great activity to do, this is my 7th year and we've never done this before. So I did appreciate it, in a way that, we haven't done before, so.
Well, and I think sometimes, whenever a board, and I can say that even me, I mean, I am a former board member, I sat on the board for 9 years, we don't often really see the breadth of the work that we do. I mean, oftentimes we come, we have discussion, we vote on things, and we really don't have the opportunity to sit back and reflect on what it is that we've done over the year. And if we take the time to do that evaluation and to see, wow, I really didn't understand, or, what does this really mean to me as a board member and the decisions that I'm making. And the other thing I will tell you, that pretty consistently, I find that when a board evaluates itself, they tend to be much harder on themselves and seem to think that they're not doing a really good job when in fact you really are. So I think that that's often really important. Maybe it's something that you can continue to do on a consistent basis that will help you kind of adjust some of the things that you're doing. So then, one of the things that you wanted to talk about, and I think we can kind of piggyback on what you've already said, Amy, is, okay, you set 6 goals last year. And because everything came to a screeching halt come March, a lot of boards have really made the decision that in looking at the goals that they had for 19 and 20, because they really weren't able to actually get them all to come to fruition because of the circumstances, some of them are really looking at the goals that they had and really making a decision as to whether have we accomplished these goals, or are these goals still in progress and we need to carry them over again for this year. So you brought up the strategic plan, and I had a conversation with Dr. Stefankowitz about the 2 strategic plans that we kind of have on hold. And I do think that we're going to need to be able to find a way to finish those out virtually. And I think that we can, and I think it's something that we could easily do. It's just, we're gonna have to change things up a little bit. Because we're at the section where we have to create objectives with regards to the strategic plan. Because when we went into the strategic planning process, we have to remember that the 2 strategic plans that we're doing for this year, that we started, still falls under the umbrella of the district's strategic plan. And so we're using the same goal areas, and we're using essentially the same goal statements for those goal areas. We just now need to flesh out the information that we got at those first 2 meetings to create the objectives for those goals, and then be able to move forward with them. So I think that's something that we're going to be able to do virtually. It's just, I think Dr. Stefankowitz and I really have to have a conversation with Jen and with your building principal as to how we can make those happen.
Kathy, can I jump in for a second?
Sure.
I'm sorry. So I just, one of the challenges that you and I spoke about yesterday was in some of the districts that are moving forward, and correct me, but I think you had told me that a lot of districts right now are kind of keeping it on hold. They're not really doing them, but in a few that are, the administration has been a big part of assisting with the field reps as far as doing breakout rooms and working with groups. And obviously that creates a little bit of a challenge, because in our previous meetings there was concern about the direct role of administration working with the groups. So I think that was one of the things we talked about as being a challenge as to exactly how we would facilitate some of these groups, because traditionally administration is typically a big part of this process. But I think there was a lot of discussion last year about not having that be the case.
So I think, if we decide, however we decide to move forward, I think that's really going to be a conversation that we're going to need to kind of flesh out. I did tell Jim that we do have a committee within the field service department that is looking at our strategic planning process to see how we can move forward with it virtually. Because I will tell you, if you saw the school board notes, I think it was not this past week, the week before, our executive director has extended our no in-person training until January 1st. So originally we were supposed to be able to be back out and about with our boards and with the association membership come, I think it was November 1st. And then they did a reassessment and they kind of extended that to January 1st. And the other piece of it is the governor really hasn't lifted the 25 people or 25% of the capacity, whichever is lower. So that really moves us down to 25 people that you could get together face to face. But then remember that when we're meeting face to face, we're working in small groups, which we may not be able to do the 6 feet distancing. So I think that we'll be able to find a way to move forward. So that's something that we'll carry over into the next year as far as your goals go. But I guess what I really need to find out from you is the 6 goals that you had from last year. Are these still viable goals that you want to move forward with and continue for this year? Or are there new goals that you want to focus on in the upcoming year?
I mean, I'll open this up to board members. I mean, I think that some of these can be, or I also think that some of the, I think there's some things that, some board members have brought up. I had a few board members email me that might be a little bit more important. Like, of course we know that, I'm just pulling an example here, that number 4, we know that district-wide security procedures and policies are important and that we still want Class 3 officers everywhere. We know it's important, but in a year where, we are also faced with what we're faced with, there might be other goals that are more important this year. So I guess my first question would be, how many goals do most boards have?
I will tell you 6 is a lot.
Right.
When we do goals, we really tell you that in order to make significant accomplishment or progress towards the achievement of your goals, that we recommend no less than 3, but no more than 5. Because part of the process, part of it is, it's good to have a lot of goals, but if you have a large number of goals, can you really get them all accomplished within a year's period of time, or can there be significant progress being made towards the accomplishment of those goals? I mean, just like when we did the strategic plan, Dr. Sapankiewicz and his team put together action plans. So when your board creates goals, you should be developing action plans that lay out step by step, how are you going to accomplish these goals? Who's going to be responsible for carrying them out? What kind of resources are you going to need? So if I'm able to, am I still able to share my screen? Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, let me find this. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but there are some things here that I do want to just kind of point out to you as we go through this. And I'm going to flash through these really quickly. Talking about your different goals, okay, so we have the district goals. Your district goals are coming from your strategic plan. So your strategic plan really drives all of the goals that happen within your district goals, which are the goals that you evaluate the superintendent on every year, your Board of Education goals, to your administrator building the whole way down. So it kind of drives everything that goes in. So we're really not talking about district goals tonight because of the strategic plan. But the other thing that you need to ensure as a board that all of the work that you're doing really does advance your mission statement of the district. That is focused first and foremost. Some of the things that were considerations, for this year as far as goals go, which, you're pretty much encompassing within your strategic plan, talking about the learning loss and the emotional, social emotional support. These were the district goals. So when we talk about board goals, we really focus on, okay, what was in the evaluation, what's currently existing that we need to carry forward. So these were the board goals that we had for last year. We talk about essential questions about professional development, but I wanted to show you, here's what an action plan looks like. So for your goals, when the board establishes their goals, you would put the goal up here, okay, what activities is the board going to undertake to accomplish that goal? So when you look at the goals that you have, like for instance, you were talking about facilities plan, okay, what kind of activities does the board need to undertake in order to achieve this goal? And then you have to have, excuse me, who's going to be assigned to that particular activity? What kind of resources are you going to need to accomplish that activity? What are the timelines? And then how will we be able to tell if it's been achieved? Hold on. So you need to be able to put together good, actionable activities to carry out these goals. So if you have 6 goals, that's a lot of activities for you to be able to go through and accomplish. So I would say to you, you may want to narrow it down to maybe 3 or 4 goals. Based on what's happening this year, with the whole, remote, hybrid, are we going to have to close schools? Are we going to have to reopen? What if we have to open and close, multiple times? It's a lot of things that you're doing on top of your original board goal. So I would say to you, okay, if board members had ideas for other goals, what kind of ideas did they have?
Ms. Gilman, do you want to talk to yours since you're here and it's fresh to you?
I said something pretty generic about revising our goals to better reflect the realities around us that include social justice. We can do that through different programs made available to staff and to the students, whether it's in the form of an assembly or a video or interactive activities, taking a look at some of our curriculums, specifically history, perhaps addressing some of the people that don't normally come into the spotlight that we may not have known about. Something like that. Really haven't worked it out yet, but just still fleshing it out.
Okay, so with a particular goal like that, with talking about program, curriculum, revising curriculum, just understand that that piece is activities that belong to how it would be carried out, and is more a district goal versus a specific board goal. So if you were, I'm sitting here trying to see if, how the goal could be worded so that it would keep the board within its lane versus moving it over into the administration of how something gets carried out. So when you're talking about goals, the board goals are goals that belong specifically to the board. So if we go back to, and I'm sorry if this takes people and says, oh my gosh, but the Venn diagrams, okay, so when you talk about goals, okay, the district goals, They're owned by everyone, and the superintendent is responsible for carrying them out. They revolve around program, instruction, staffing, professional development for the staff, facilities, and funding. So the board goals are generally established to improve processes, procedures, tasks, okay, that are owned by the board. Every now and then, a district goal and a board goal could intersect. And those goals would be, for instance, the facilities goal that's here is number 1, okay? You're developing this long-term educational and facilities plan, okay? That is a goal that is a district goal, and it's also a board goal, because in developing the plan, there are certain responsibilities that belong to the Board of Education. And other parts of that goal belong to administration. So that you need to make sure that when you're doing your board goals, that they are things that are owned by the board. Okay, and not kind of going over into the district goal for here circle. And then you have your CSA goals, the superintendent's goals. Those are the superintendent's professional development goals. And the board generally does not have any input into those professional development goals. Those are the things that the superintendent determines on his own. The only time that they would intersect with the board goals would be if in doing the superintendent's evaluation, there was something contained within the evaluation that leadership skills that, the board really felt just went so totally wrong this year, that the board could recommend to the superintendent that as part of his professional development plan, he may want to work on this. And then those merit goals are completely outside of the realm of the board or my part of this, because that's part of his contract. And that's something that the board and the superintendent agree. So I would caution you as you're going about and developing those board goals to make sure that they're goals that actually belong to you. If that makes sense.
That makes sense. I mean, I think that's a good explanation just in general. I mean, I know that, speaking for what I think, I know that Irene and I know that Denise both sent goals over to us, to Ken. So we can share them with everybody and go through them. I think that we also need to do a more in-depth conversation about, like we said, the 1920 goals. I mean, I think communication, as we said, came up in most of our evaluation, and I know many of us feel very strongly about it, that needs to stay on there, but it also may have developed into something different than what it was last year. So our communication goal could stay, but it might be something, a little bit different than what it was the previous year. So, I don't know if any other board members have something to say or chime in here.
Well, first I want to say I wrote down like 3 things that I'll send you. Okay.
Okay.
The thing that seems to be a little disjointed on what was said was that, let's say there's something specific, like for example, one thing that kind of sticks out on me this past year was that when we had those strategic planning sessions, there were very few parents, and there were no parents that were really represented minority households. So to me, that felt like a huge chasm that we need to figure out how to pass and how to get through to be able to address the English as a second language families that we have and get them more involved. And I'm trying to understand, because I'm trying to understand how that kind of relates to what you were saying, that I don't know if it's a board thing, I don't know if it's a administrative thing, but as a school community, we need that. We need that. Because I was incredibly disappointed at the turnout of parents at those events, and specifically about not having any minorities at those events.
Well, and so I think a communication goal that you're trying to do, and I don't know that it's necessarily, it is communication, but within communication you have community engagement, and you also have community outreach, okay, which are two very different things. The engagement is trying to bring the community in and get them engaged in the educational process that's going on in the district. And then the outreach is more from the district out to the community. So that type of a goal, okay, is something that ends up belonging to both the district and to the board. And what you may need to do is to find ways to, I guess, more effectively reach out to your diverse communities. And I'm trying to think, I did have one district, and what I can do is I can pull up that goal and share it with you, that particular board had used. And what I would say to you is, you don't want to use the goal word for word, but to look at the goal statement and see how you can make it be Township of Oceans goal, based on your community and how you want to reach out and engage those people to get involved in the process. You know, it was like really interesting to the point, you know, with the strategic planning that we had done this time. When we did the district strategic plan, and I'm thinking, oh, Jim, correct me, was that 2 or 3 years ago?
I think we're working on 4 now, Kathy.
You know, but I mean, we had.
Yeah, very good turnout.
We had very good turnout, and we also had a lot of your
Hispanic and
yes,
African American
yes.
families. Yeah.
We had a lot of participation, and I don't know, you know, and maybe because it was a larger district strategic planning initiative versus just a school and a special ed department, that we were doing those two groups where maybe we didn't get as many people to come in.
Well, but you know, remembering that you know the population of Dell Avenue is you know there's a significant Hispanic, you know, Portuguese, you know, African American population there. So certainly that's we should be able, you know, in a successful attempt to try to get representation of the entire community. You know, it's not that there's a shortage of diversity at that school. It's you know, it's one of the strengths, and certainly you're correct. We did not see great representation there.
Well, I'll send you my things, Amy. We can talk later.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure
You know, so I think, you know, so I will send you that particular goal. I mean, I would assume that you're still also going to want to keep goal number 2, because that's going to continue. I mean, considering the state of the state budget, I would anticipate that number 2, with the loss of state aid, is going to be something that's going to be really big for this year also.
Right.
You know, and to be able to, you know, find ways, continue to find, I mean, have Ken do his magic to find, you know, all of this invisible money that's out there that we can bring, you know, into the school district. But then the other part of that is, you know, when your kids when your students and your staff went to all remote learning? You know, what was the, you know, are you gonna have to do something in this year's budget that's going to need to ensure that every student in your district has access to internet or hotspots, or, you know, if you have to, you know, go again for an extended period of time. So I think, you know, that budget goal is something that you're going to need to continue with. You could, yes?
So I know we're trying to trim down the goals, and so I'm hesitant to throw new topics out there, but maybe
that's okay.
This might be able to be wrapped up with budget-related items, but I think a very important task the board has in front of them this year is we're up for contract renegotiations.
Yes, and that's going to, so that in and of itself is going to need to be able.
Right.
You know, for the board to be able to, you know, and negotiate a contract that's going to meet the needs of, you know, the student, staff, and community. I mean, because some of it is we need to ensure, you know, that our kids are getting a good, proper education, and that, you know, we're negotiating a contract that's not going to be way out of the realm of what your community can support. So definitely, for sure, the negotiations goal, and I can send you some wording for a negotiations goal, will be one of your goals for this year.
Kathy?
Yes?
I just have a quick question about the difference between district goals and board goals, because I saw on your example list about social emotional learning, and you know, I'm very proud to say that our district did put in and created a wellness committee. So I had written just a little something, but I'm not sure if that, like how you would make it into a board goal instead of a district goal, because it's ongoing. And we've been working really hard in the meetings weekly to address social learning and bring it into the district even more than it had been. So this is what I wrote, and I just wanted to see your thoughts on this and how to make it into a board goal instead of maybe a district goal, or what your thoughts are. So basically what we did was create a wellness committee that it's a mental health wellness committee that incorporates administration, board members, staff, parents, and the community that will create a social emotional learning plan to roll out into our district to promote and address social emotional learning and wellness, and to provide continued support, resources, and referrals needed. So what are your thoughts on that?
So have you actually established a committee?
Yes.
Okay, is it a district committee or is it a board ad hoc committee?
District.
Okay.
Board members serve on it, but it is a district committee.
Okay. So the way that goal is written is more of a district goal. So I'm trying to think, you know, I think, you know, for a board goal, you could potentially say to continue to I'm trying to think on my feet, but it would be pretty much to continue to support the efforts of the mental health wellness committee in addressing the mental health and social emotional needs of your students, staff, and parents. You know, to be able to correct, and so what that would mean is if you have continued to support, okay, that committee, then whatever it is that the committee may need as far as resources, or if the committee is going to recommend to administration changes to curriculum or programs, that then when the superintendent brings that to the board, that the board is going to support it through, funding, budget monies, if you need to increase or hire specific staff that revolves around it. So that's how the board would be able to support the work that committee does. And if the board feels that having that very specific social or emotional goal is important, that may be the way to incorporate. Because the board needs to be able to support that district goal.
Amy, I'm assuming we're not trying to work out the actual goals tonight, right?
No.
No, we're not.
Okay.
No.
So
The
I
plan
think-
would be that for everybody to kind of, again, send your goals and your ideas over, and we can bring them in. I mean, because there's certain things, like Kathy's saying about how to maybe write Grace Ann's idea, that might be able to be coupled with Irene's idea of to support these, committees that are being formed, so it might be able to be things that are coupled together of supporting committees that the district is, I'm just going to get it.
So with Irene's goal that, potentially the goal that she brought up, okay, so what the board needs to do is to go back and see what would our responsibility be with this particular goal.
Right.
And then craft it around what the board's responsibility is. The board's responsibility, would be the providing the resources, adopting the curriculum, whatever it is that those committees would bring, to the administration, and then for the administration to bring it to the board.
Okay, so I guess,
Amy,
yes.
I think too, we have to at some point go through our goals from last year and see which of any of them we want to carry over to this
Yeah,
year.
so what I was gonna say was, is it all right, Kathy, if we, we'll get back to this next week, our next meeting, go through them, and then when we kind of finalize our goals, can we send them to you so that you can let us know if they're appropriate, if they're written?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that would be probably the best way to do it.
And you and I can have a conversation, and then I can bring back to the board your suggestions off of what we come up with.
Right, and then I'll look for that one goal that the one district did as far as the community outreach went.
And also for negotiations.
And for negotiations that I wrote that. So I can kind of put those together and send them one. And based on some of the discussions, I made a lot of notes here. I can sit and try and see based on the conversations that we had, if I can come up with some language for some of the other goals, or areas for goals that people brought up.
That would be great. Thank you so much for your time.
No, and then I will, I'll have a follow-up conversation then with Jim with regards to the strategic planning, so that we can kind of let you know what that plan of action is going to be moving forward.
Great.
And then just as a brief commercial, just so you know, Thursday, next month, along with, I'm not going to pull out my calendar so I can tell you the exact date, will be the first Monmouth County meeting is going to be on Tuesday, October 13th.
Yeah, that's it.
And if I remember correctly, that's going to be a social emotional piece.
What that meeting, because we meet that night as well.
Usually we meet at 6 o'clock. And the other thing is on October 7th, if you know of any people who are running for the board, we're having a candidates briefing where we're just meeting with those people who are running for the board to kind of give them an overview on what roles and responsibilities they have as board members. That will be on Wednesday, October 7th. That's going to be in the evening, but we're also doing one on Wednesday morning, September 30th. So we
If they want to register for that, how do they? I know we have some.
If they want to register for it, they can go onto our website, and there will be a form that they can fill out to register. And if you can't find, and what I'll do is, when I send you the information, I can find the link and send you the link to the registration if you want to go with another one. And then of course workshops. So those are just some things that will be going on. So I unshared my screen.
Thank
so
you.
I think I'm good, and I'll be in touch then.
All right, I appreciate it, Kathy. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care. Good night.
Thank you.
Happy, see you.
Hi. Do I have any old business from any board members? No? Any new business? I don't think I see anybody. Okay. Can they have public comment on any item at this time?
Cindy White.
Hi, I'm perfectly happy to stay on for a minute. I'm going to respectfully request that we consider starting the special ed strategic planning over again and possibly Dell Avenue. So much is being at Dell Avenue. And it's a whole, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's a whole new special ed programming now with remote learning and hybrid learning and IEP meetings not being held, and it's a different world. And because there's been so much time and so many changes, that maybe we should just start anew in January when maybe the threat of shutting down has passed, and allow everybody to start again and start fresh and new. Melissa will have been there for a while. At Dow, the parents will have become used to the new normal. Same thing with special ed. Everything is so different than it was when we began all of this. I think that we would be doing a disservice to just jump in and start all over again. So I am requesting that be considered.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
No.
Oh, there you go. Go ahead. No?
No.
Okay. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
All right, we are adjourned.
Wow.
You clear?